Welcome to the pre-show, everyone. We are recording live, getting ready for the study group, Security Plus study group today. If you're watching this on the replay, you can fast forward about 10 minutes and we'll get started. If you're here live, you can fast forward 10 minutes and break all rules of physics. Hello, chat room. Some folks ended up there a little early today. I was just troubleshooting my bird feeder, which has no audio on it, which makes me sad. So I've got to work on that today. Figure out, why don't I have audio on my bird feeder? Something happened. I think an NVIDIA driver was updated automatically. Thank you, NVIDIA and Microsoft and all of these companies that really think they should install drivers without any type of user intervention. I really appreciate it. So now I have to go figure out why this broke stuff. And it obviously broke the audio interface. I might just plug in a USB audio and be done with it. Instead of troubleshooting the other thing, I'll just add another driver to the mix. That's always the right answer, isn't it? Let's just complicate things further in an effort to resolve whatever problem this is that we're trying to get rid of. Instead of actually figuring out where the problem is, well, we'll have to work on that. Let's log out of that. Let's change the website. That's something we could do. Let's be productive with our time, shall we? Instead of complaining about audio drivers and video drivers and automatic updates and the man sticking it to me. Let's go to some settings to my promo bar on my website. I'm sort of looking over my shoulder here as I do this. My Security Plus study group is right now, ! Click here to join us. And I need to redirect people to the /live page. The /live page. Save changes. Oh, really? I'm not authenticated? That's not good. Pretty sure I'm authenticated. Why am I not authenticated now? It's a good question. Probably has something to do with that audio driver not working properly, if I had to guess. If I had to venture a guess. All right. Anybody remember my WordPress password? Anyone? This is why I have LastPass. Right there. Boom. Goes dynamite. Right there. Are we authenticated yet? So slow. So let's try this again, shall we? I have to now come right back to the page. My Security Plus study group is, I did not want to do that. Oh, good. Reset all my fonts to that size. Right now, ! Click here to join us, /live, and I'm going to reset the cookie and save the changes so people will see it even if they've hidden the promo bar. And that's it. It'll automatically go away at 1 o'clock. It's almost noon my time. What else? That's pretty good. Start to whatever it is we're doing here. Boy, it got dark out. What happened to the sun? Supposed to be some rain coming through. Where is my radar? Let's see what's going on out there in the world. We kind of see what's going on in the world, but we can't see what's going on in the world. Well, that's not good when the radar isn't showing anything. Have you turned it off and turned it back on again? Which is what I just did. If you are watching this live on YouTube, the live chat is not on YouTube. You'll notice there's no chat there. There's no chat to speak of on YouTube. You have to go to professormaster.com/live. What's the URL again? It's /live. Camera check, everybody. Hi. Camera 2. Camera 3. Let's put something up you can actually see on camera 4. Like that. Camera 4. All right. That's good. That's working. That's doable. That's viable. That's delicious, delightful, lovely. Okay. And we'll put this into the chat. Do that. If you're on professormesser.com/live, instructions for joining the Socrative room are on the page. Socrative.com, click the student login and go to room Professor Messer, as it's spelled on the page. What else are we doing here? We're in good shape. Okay. All right. Is that it? Are we done? Okay, everybody. Oh, tweet should have gone out. Let's see if the tweet really did go out. Did it go out? Yes, it did. There's the tweet on the Twitter, which means the Facebook must have gone out as well. And I don't know that I did a Facebook event this time, but it'll be posted on my page, which, of course, only a fraction of Facebook users who are liked or subscribed to my page will see. And it'll be on Google+. So welcome, everybody. Let's see if people are here. I can see if you're here. Let's go to the analytics, shall we? Oh, sure you're here. Hi. There you are. Everybody's joining now. Of course you are. We're just about ready to get going in a few minutes. We got 3 minutes. 3 minutes. Bird feeder is 1080p, yes. Oh, gosh. Would not do that one 720. This is 720. That's 720. That's 720. But the bird feeder's not. Bird feeder's 1080p. Oh, look, we got someone joining us. That's nice. Oh, there he goes. I think the rain's coming. I think the rain is coming. I wonder if I should just cut instead of dissolve to these different. It's so hard to dissolve properly. Oh, I know, the 4K thing. I've already spec'd out what would I need to make this 4K, and would I want to do this in 4K? Would I want to create all of my content in 4K and publish it in 4K? I don't know. I don't think we're quite there. It was a big deal when we all went from, oh, it's raining. That's what it is. It's a big deal when we all went from 480p to 1080p or even 720. I mean, I went right to HD as soon as I could. I went to HD before YouTube went to HD. YouTube was not the first spot for HD. So I was on Vimeo probably at that point. I started on a different site. I can't even remember. I have somewhere written the statistics for the other sites. I was on 2 other video sharing sites. It's not even around anymore. And then moved to Vimeo. Vimeo changed their terms of service to make it appear as if it wasn't a good idea to host your videos there. I don't know what they were thinking. They obviously made a mistake, and they realized later that they made a mistake, and they changed the terms of service. But by that time, I left for YouTube, which turned out to be a great idea because everybody was on YouTube. YouTube hit. YouTube became the thing. So that's what happened with that. So what are you going to do? Because hosting it myself would have been a thing. Yeah, I could see wedding videos. You want to record that in the highest resolution possible. These training videos are valuable. They're extremely valuable for about 3 years, and on a particular day, they become worthless. So it's a little different than videos you would take for a wedding, for graduation. Your family pictures become more valuable over time, and they never get less valuable. Whereas training videos are valuable up until the point where you don't need to be trained on that anymore, and then you will no longer have any value there. So it's interesting. I have all of my previous courses on a disk in a drawer. I'll never reference them again. Nobody wants them. I'll never edit them again, but there they are. It's just a weird thing. Anyway, Let's do a study group, everybody. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the February 2017 Security Plus study group from Messer Studios here at ProfessorMesser.com. I'm your host, James Messer, and for the next hour, I'm going to ask you questions about topics from the Security Plus exam objectives. We'll go through some questions online. You get to answer the questions online, and then we get to see how you did. So it's a nice little exercise we do to see how well do you know what you're doing. I'll explain to you in just a moment how we get to that point. There is a lot going on here that we can talk about, though. First, let me give you an update. If you've never attended one of these study groups before, it's good to have an idea of what's coming up. This is something that I do every month. So there's another study group next month. I do one almost every week. So there's an A+ study group, a Network Plus study group. This is our Security Plus study group of the month. If you want to know more about any of the things that we're doing, you can always follow us on the many and varied social networking sites. You can go to ProfessorMesser.com/YouTube, ProfessorMesser.com/Twitter. Of course, don't pay full price for your vouchers. Go to ProfessorMesser.com/vouchers, and there is a 10% off. So that's kind of nice to have that there. Also, there are a number of people that watch all of my videos online, because that's one of the crazy things I do is I take every single one of my videos for every single one of my training courses, and I put them out online every minute of every video for everyone to see. I know. It's crazy, but there it is. Some people, though, like an offline version of this, or they would like an MP3 version of audio that they can listen to while they're traveling, while they're mobile, while they're in their car, while they're walking around. I also include my course notes with this bundled package as well. You can find out more about that at ProfessorMesser.com/GetSecPlus, GetSecPlus. And of course, you can always buy each one of these things individually as well. You don't have to buy a bundle. This isn't like buying a video game system where they force you to buy all of these things. You can, of course, purchase them individually without any type of financial disadvantage for doing that. So it's kind of nice too. And if you've already bought one, you want to upgrade, I credit you the cost of the upgrade, so you don't have to pay extra money if you ever want to upgrade. I just find that silly. There's a lot that we're going to do today. I take all of the pop quiz, or all of the questions I do during the study group, and I make pop quizzes out of them, 20-question pop quizzes. So if you haven't gone through the last year of study groups, but you sure would like to go through some of the questions and see how well you know these topics, you can go to ProfessorMesser.com/pop-quiz, and there's a number of quizzes sitting there. There's, of course, Security Plus. That's what we're talking about today. I've got A+ pop quizzes there. I've got Network Plus pop quizzes there. And I just keep putting more and more questions there. It's almost like a static archive of all of the questions that we go through in the study group, which is kind of interesting. Through the years, people have said, I want an audio version of the study group. So one of the things that I recently added is a podcast version of this. So if you're watching the video on YouTube, you've got the video and the audio. But some people like to have a podcast version. It can be automatically downloaded by your podcast app. You can go to a screen and click play, and you're just downloading the audio. It's very easy on your bandwidth. And that's available, of course, at ProfessorMesser.com/podcasts. So that becomes useful, easy to do there. And there are links there for RSS feeds. You can point your podcast catcher to that particular URL, to the XML feed, the RSS feed, and be able to get all of those things to work as well. During this study group, you will be answering questions that I give you. To see these questions, you only need to go to a single website. This is absolutely free. It's Socrative.com. You click the student login and go to the room name, or type in the room name, Professor Messer. Make sure you type it correctly, ProfessorMesser. Make sure that you type it in properly, or you're not going to have anybody there in the room. There won't be any questions. You won't see anything. This is one where also you won't see this if you're watching this on a replay. So sorry, you have to be here live to be able to participate live and answer the questions. So make sure that you're able to do that as well. This is one, if you want to know when the next event is, you can always go to my calendar, ProfessorMesser.com/calendar, to see that. Now, if you have typed this in and you're on Socrative, or you downloaded the Socrative app to your mobile device, you want the Socrative student app, not the Socrative teacher app. Teacher app's mine, student app is yours. Make sure that you go to Socrative.com. And if you are in the right room, you typed in everything properly, you will see a question that popped up. And that question is, how's that New Year's resolution working out? This is our test question. Obviously, this has nothing to do with Security Plus, but I get to see the answers of these as they are here on my screen. I'm going to click How Did We Do? So a number of you have answered. Wow, 35% of you are right on track with your New Year's resolution. Good for you. Nice job, by the way. 37% are just folks that have no interest in making resolutions. Forget that nonsense. So actually, they're winning. The 37% of you have answered C, I don't make resolutions. 11% said that resolution lasted about 5 minutes until midnight 05, and then it was over. It was just done. No more resolutions for you. A number of you were in a position where you don't even remember the resolution that you made. That's a difficult thing. And some of you are no longer working out. Since we're asking how the New Year's resolution's working out, I'm assuming it had something to do with you working out, but you're no longer working out. I think you see what I did there. Y'all can't be winners, people. Stay with me. There's a lot that we're going to go through and other questions I'm going to pop up, so just stay on that page where you are, and when I update the question on my side, it will automatically change on your side. We're going to talk about the Security Plus Q&A today. The Security Plus exam, the current version, if you are here on February in 2017, the latest version is SY0401. Make sure SY0401 is the one that you are studying from. All of your materials should have that number on it. Everything should be saying SY0401. You'll notice this was released in April of 2014. This is getting a little long in the tooth, as they say in the world of CompTIA, because usually they update these about every 3 years. What I'm hearing on the street, the rumor is, word gets around, guys say things, is probably near the end of the year we'll probably see the update. Or certainly it probably isn't going to be April. We haven't even seen the latest exam objectives. So that's a little bit more of a challenge. CompTIA is releasing some newer certifications here at the beginning of the year. It's probably taking more of their time. And one nice thing about security is the technologies generally don't change dramatically over a year to year. And intrusion prevention device works exactly the same today as it did 10 years ago. A firewall is exactly the same thing we had 10 years ago. Well, a little bit different, but close enough. The concept behind it is certainly very similar. Things don't change dramatically like they do in the A+, for example, where things happen very quickly on the hardware side. Things change on the operating system side constantly. We don't deal with that in Security Plus. So I think we're okay waiting till the end of the year. The point is, if you're studying for exam, keep studying. Take this version of the exam. Do not wait, never wait to get certified. There's too many upsides and practically no downside for waiting. So it's important. This is a single exam, 90 questions. You have to get a score 750 on a scale of 100 to 900, and every question is worth a different number of points. So we really don't know how they score anything, and CompTIA doesn't tell us. Just make sure you know what's on the exam objectives, and you'll do fine. There are a combination of question types on the exam. A lot of it is multiple choice, but there are a number of different questions at the beginning that CompTIA calls performance-based questions. These are the questions that might be fill in the blank. They might be a matching question. They might ask you to perform a task. There might be a command line, although on the Security Plus, there are no command lines to have to know. So that's one thing we don't have to worry about on the exam. But you may be presented with something that's not multiple choice. So one of the things I like to do on our study group is really start off with a performance-based question. This is something we can try some of these ideas. This is sort of a mini performance-based question. It's not a full-blown one, but it will certainly give you the feel for a performance-based question. So here we go. This one is sort of a video daily double because I've created a picture for this one. The question is, I want you to configure a firewall rule that allows the management server to view the screen of the web server. And I've presented to you an image of the network. And I've also presented to you an empty firewall rule set. So you're going to have to build a firewall rule. I think I have 2 lines there for the rule numbers. You only need 1 rule number. So fill out that first line of the rule number. I was thinking maybe I'd do some more of these. But here is, you want to be able to take the management, like you're already answering on my side, some of these things. You're going to have to take this description of allowing the management server to view the screen of the web server. This is a question that is asked of security people all the time. I need you to configure the firewall. Let me get my head out of the way so you can actually see this one here. Well, that's the wrong screen. Let's get you on the right screen. There we go. So one of the things that you will notice on this screen is that there is quite a bit. So on the left side of the screen is a web server, a video server, and a file server. They're all connected to a switch that's connected to the firewall. And on the other side of the firewall seems to be, that's the DMZ. The other side of the firewall is the internal network. And on the internal network is a database server, a management server, and the storage server. Now, my question asks you to configure a rule that allows the management server, that must be this device right here on the middle, on the right side, to view the screen of the web server. And we got to find the web server, which is up here on the left. So that's the only hints I'm going to give you about filling in the details of this particular firewall rule. So this is something that I realize if you've never worked with firewalls before, you've never really had any type of interaction with configuring a firewall, this might be a little unusual to you. So I really would recommend that you even try the firewall that's in Windows. You can perform and go through and create firewall rules in a Windows firewall. There are also a number of firewalls that are in a Linux runtime ready-to-go virtual machine. You could even load up if you were wanting to really try this in a lab and try it with your own devices and work through some of those things. That's kind of fun too. It's a little outside the scope of the exam, but it certainly helps you with that muscle memory. You're actually going through the process, you're watching what happens, you're able to understand what you're seeing, and you're able to remember it because you're the one that did it. You typed it in. It's different than watching somebody else do it. I don't know why that is. There's probably a very complex thinking education concept there that I am unaware of, but that's one of those things that you have to think of. So at this point, you should have an idea anyway of what a good firewall rule might be for this. So I think I put a firewall rule in here. Let's see how I did on this firewall rule. So here's the rule that I added to my firewall. Of course, our question is, I want to allow the management server to view the screen of the web server. So the first thing we need to do is find the IP addresses of these two devices. The source device is going to be your management server. So our management server is 10.2.1.47. So that's going to be my source IP address for this rule. So I'm going to put that in at 10.2.1.47. All of this traffic is going to be going to which server is it? The web server. That's the question here. And my web server is 10.1.1.2. So in my destination IP, I put 10.1.1.2. Now, one of the things that's interesting about this also is that you notice you don't do it the other direction. Certainly traffic's coming back the other way. When you talk to that server, it has to respond back to you, but you don't have to put a second rule in the firewall for that. This firewall is stateful. Most of the firewalls you'll ever be using are stateful. This is not a packet filter. This is a stateful firewall. So whenever it builds that flow, and it is initiated by your management device and builds the flow to the web server, your firewall understands, yeah, the web server is going to be talking back to you. I already know exactly what port numbers you're using. I'm going to allow that traffic the other direction because you have initiated this particular flow. This is exactly the way your firewall works if you have one at home. You should have one at home on your internet connection. You'll notice you never have to configure it. You never have to put rules. It's just defined to allow all outbound traffic. And when you do that, it allows that particular outbound flow to come, of course, back to you as long as it has exactly the same IP address and the same port numbers in place. That's one of the nice things about this. Now, in this case, you'll notice we're using TCP 3389 as the port number. That's because the question specifically asked you to create a rule that allowed you to view the screen of the web server. And when you say view the screen, you should automatically be thinking about remote desktop protocol. And the remote desktop protocol, of course, uses TCP, and it uses TCP over port 3389. The last piece of information on a firewall, we call this a tuple. The last tuple, each one of these is a tuple. And the last tuple on the firewall, the last piece of information, the last option available is whether we allow this traffic or block this traffic. And because we are trying to create a rule that allows the management server to view the screen of a web server, this particular rule ends in allow. And that means it's going to evaluate all of the other tuples in the rule. And the last piece is really the disposition. If the IP address matches this, and the destination IP address matches this one, and the protocol matches this, and the port number matches this, we have a match. And at that point, what do we do with it? Well, in this case, we allow that traffic. If we wanted to prevent someone from using remote desktop from the management server to that other web server, we would put a deny or a block in there, depending on what your firewall uses as the nomenclature. So there's our answer. The answer is a source IP address of 10.2.1.47, a destination IP 10.1.1.2, protocol TCP port 3389. I'm flipping through the answers on my side, which you can't see. A lot of you got this one absolutely right. Well done. A lot of you not working much with firewall. Some of you guys missed the port number. That's okay. That's an easy one to memorize and figure out. This is a really good example, though, of this list of protocols they give you on these exams, like the Network Plus and the Security Plus. They give you that big list of your protocols. You're wondering, how am I going to use these? I have to memorize these protocols. When would I ever need to know this information? Here's a good example of when you might need to know this information. It comes in really handy to know these things. And it's a really good example of how they can use performance-based questions to take these things that are rote memorization and actually use them in a practical sense. So it's something you should always think about when you're memorizing those pieces and going through those details. So well done with that. I think at least half of you did a pretty good job on that. Yeah, so people in the chat room are saying, why didn't the question just say remote desktop? Because it shouldn't have, because that's a giveaway. I wanted to make it a little bit harder than that. You need to understand that the remote desktop protocol is used for viewing the screen of a web server. And you'll notice with all the questions, almost none of my questions these days will ask you a straight answer to a question. I'm not going to ask you, what's the port number of RDP? I'm going to give you a question like this that makes you step through a couple of iterations. Let's do another one which has a step through a couple of iterations. Here's a question for you. This question is, which of these best describes the association of your physical location with a video taken on a mobile phone? Doesn't seem like those two things go together. Which of these best describes the association of your physical location with a video taken on a mobile phone? Now, one of the things you need to know is that I've got a multiple choice here. Don't answer in the chat room. You want to answer on Socrative. Don't give any hints in the chat room. We're going to see how well we do. We're going to pretend that we're sitting for the exam and we've been given possible answers of video presence, credential management, mobile device management, application whitelisting, or geotagging. One of these would best describe the association of your physical location with a video taken on a mobile phone. If you know the answer, go to Socrative.com to the room name Professor Messer. You're going to be able to go through and figure these pieces out too. Maybe that's one we need to work through. This is a good one to know. Whenever you talk about mobile phones especially, the mobile phones are a big part of all of the latest exams because obviously everyone is using a mobile device in our organizations these days. So there's a lot of security issues, there are networking issues, there are management issues, there are all of these really complex technologies that come into play because we're often also integrating with the mobile company, multiple mobile companies to do this because people in your organization some might be on AT&T, some might be on T-Mobile, some might be on a third party, a Verizon, or anyone else. So you have to make sure that you're able to manage these devices so that they can use the device, not only for their personal use, they can use it for work. And then all of that information also remains secure, which is pretty important too. This particular technology is an interesting one because it really helps you with other types of mobile security. I'll explain more about this in a moment. Now that a lot of you answered this question, let's see how we did. I'm going to click the How Do We Do button. 92% of you said geotagging. So I'm not sure if that's the right answer or not. A lot of you really think so because nobody said application whitelisting. 3% said video presence. 1% said credential management. 5% said mobile device management. Is geotagging even a thing? Is that something I made up? It's always the challenge, of course. Sometimes I do that on these questions. But in this particular question, I didn't. Geotagging really is a thing. Geotagging is a pretty important thing. And not just something that can be used to allow or disallow functionality of this mobile device, but it can also be used as an authentication measure. So that becomes handy too, to be able to have that there. This is one where you can take your mobile device. It obviously knows where you are because it has a GPS inside of it. And so it knows your longitude, your latitude, your altitude. It's able to really understand where you are. If you're taking a picture, it takes that information from your GPS and puts it into the metadata of your picture. If you are taking a video, it can take the GPS information and put it into the metadata of the video. If you are authenticating online and you're typing in information into your mobile device, it can check to see what country you're in and allow or disallow you to log in. If suddenly you're logging in from China, but you're based in Canada, maybe it would automatically restrict you from logging in because it knows where you are. So those are some of the more valuable things you can do with geotagged information. Geotagged information get people in trouble too. As a security professional, this comes in really handy because some people are in a position where they're sending you information, they're putting information in the metadata and not realizing it. So that was an interesting thing that happens all the time with geotagged information. Also can tell people where you are, maybe if you don't want to be. So you have to be pretty careful with that. A lot of the security based around mobile and social media is now they clean out the metadata before they post it because there's so many problems associated with that. So indeed, most of you were correct with this one. Didn't fool anybody. I guess we started out pretty easy with this. 92% of you answered geotagging, and indeed, that was the correct answer with that one. Since we were talking about authentication, let's move into more of an authentication question with these. So the question I have for you is this one. The question is, which of these would be a common form of single-factor authentication? Which of these would be a common form of single-factor authentication? Maybe we know what this happens to be. I have some multiple choice questions for you. So multiple choice answers for this question. The first one is PIN. Is it smart card? Could it be USB token? Might it be a GPS location? Or could it be a signature? Which of these would be a common form of single-factor authentication? Single-factor authentication. Maybe you think you know what the answer is. Of course, don't answer in the chat room. You want to go to Socrative.com. Click on the student login, go to Professor Messer is the room, all one word. The instructions for this, of course, are on professormesser.com/live. Put the instructions right there above the video, so you can find this very, very easily. Which of these would be a common form of single-factor authentication? Single-factor authentication. There are a number of forms of authentication, and certainly many factors of authentication. But we have to think about how we use these authentication mechanisms to be able to identify ourselves. One of these should really jump out at you. This one's a pretty common and very finite because the question itself is not asking for the best answer. Sometimes I ask you for that. Which one would be the best answer, the best form of single-factor authentication? Which would be applicable here? But I think one of these really is a common form of single-factor authentication. I don't think it's a very tricky question. Of course, we're really talking about electronic authentication here. So we really are talking about someone who is on an electronic device performing single-factor authentication, not something that just happens to be a factor of authentication that you would use in any other type of form. So it's something to consider as well. Let's see how we did in this one. Let's click the how do we do. 78% said PIN. Not quite as many people hopping on this as they did the geotagging because 12% said a signature, 6% said a smart card, 3% said a USB token, and 2% said a GPS location. So the real question is, what are forms then of single-factor authentication? Well, the term single-factor should be a clue for you because when you're authenticating and you're only using one piece of information, of secret or unique information, then you need to put something in that's going to identify you very cleanly, very clearly, and being able to do that. So this is the one thing that prevents the bad guys from getting into this resource. So it's pretty important that this particular answer be very spot on with all of the security concerns that you might have. So what would it be then, this one thing? Well, one very common single factor of authentication is a password. Something that you put in a username, which is well known, or at least something that's not private. Your username is generally something that's almost even guessable in many environments. The one piece of secret information, the one factor there that's used for authentication is your password. The problem, of course, is passwords, of course, can be stolen. It's not good enough to just have a password these days, it seems. On a number of online services, it is. If you're logging in and you're checking mail, you might want a little more than just a password. But a password is a very good example of a single factor authentication. Passwords, of course, because they're so easily guessed, it's not something we want to do. But passwords, as we use them, are also reused. So passwords probably not the best way to go about dealing with a single factor authentication. So let's look at all of the other options that we had then. We had, let's start with the lowest. So a GPS location. GPS location is usually used in conjunction with a password, for example, to provide authentication, or in conjunction with something else to provide authentication. We wouldn't simply say, you're in a particular GPS location, you must be you. It's not a very good way to authenticate at all. The next one, highest on our list, is a USB token, something that's more physical. But again, somebody else could get their hands on this USB token, and if that was your only form of authentication, if that was your single factor of authentication, anyone could plug in this USB token and they would be able to gain access to a particular resource. Another thing to consider is the next one on the list is a smart card. Smart card's another example of a physical device, and that physical device is one that often has an additional authentication with it. But again, if somebody gets a hold of your smart card, you don't want them automatically to have access to a resource. There's usually something else that goes along with the smart card. It is not a common form of single factor authentication. And signature got 12%, at least in the double digits here, but signatures are rarely used as a form of authentication on our digital devices. They're almost never used these days as a form of identification whenever we're signing something in real life as physical signature. A physical signature is often added along with a picture ID, for example, to be able to authenticate who you are, or to compare it to a different signature that was made at an earlier time. But that's a very poor way of authenticating, as we've seen with credit cards, for example, and it's almost never used on our digital devices to try to determine if you are who you are. There's too many variables with a signature for someone to print out or type in or write in a signature and have that authenticate you properly. And a signature can be forged. So somebody can look at your signature, pretend it's you, and if it's a bad algorithm, now somebody has access to your resources. That's just an awful way to authenticate. One very common form of single-factor authentication is a PIN, the personal identification number. A very good example of this is something like you are at an ATM machine. An ATM isn't asking you for a username. It's not asking you for a password. It's not asking you for anything other than that. It's asking you just for a PIN number. And then I know that's redundant, but we say that. This personal identification number that's there is a very common form of single-factor authentication. And in the list that we have, because other people in the chat room are saying, but there's more common ways of single-factor authentication. A password is a more common single-factor authentication. Password's not listed. That wasn't in the question. The question was, which of these would be a common form of single-factor authentication? The exam does this all the time. Be ready for this on your exam, because you might see which of these is a common form of single-factor authentication. You think, password, let me look at the list. It's not there. Wait, I thought it was password. Well, they didn't give you password. That's not one of your options. You have to now choose from what they give you. Of this list, in this list of options that is available, you have to pick the best option. So this is a very common thing to do. Now, what that should just pop right out at you. A PIN is a very common form. Yeah, voicemail. So in the chat room, people are going voicemail. We use PIN as a single form of authentication. That's another very good way to do that as well. So it's a challenge when you're working with authentication and dealing with mechanisms for security. It's important to know what single factor is, and it's also probably even more important to know what multi-factor authentication or two-factor authentication might do. It becomes handy as well to have that there. So let's talk about some of the, people, by the way, in the chat room are going, but an ATM is two-factor. Okay, well, let's do a phone call. In fact, my ATM is not two-factor, by the way. I don't need my card to use my ATM anymore. So we can't always rely on that either. Kind of a challenge, though, isn't it, to know that piece. On my ATM, I can type in my account number, which means anybody could do that. So a very good example for using that. And many in the chat room are disagreeing with that. I'm sorry. You're going to get over it. You'll be okay. It'll be all right. Let's talk about where you'd find all this information, though. This is a real challenge whenever you start looking at all of the content that is in the Security Plus exam. It is massive, massive to be able to do that. It's a real challenge to understand all of the things you need to know. I've gone through every single one of my videos. In fact, I've made my own set of notes as if you were sitting through every single one of them. Now I have over 250 videos. So there's a lot of content that is on the Security Plus exam. So one of the things that you'll run into, one of the challenges you'll run into is just having all of this information available in one single place. What I've done is compile all of this into a single PDF. It's a 36-page document. It is an enormous document, and it has everything in it, from cloud computing to multi-factor authentication to risk management to mobile security, anything that's in the exam objectives, and everything that is on my videos. It comes right from the exam objectives. It is a massive document. If you were to look through it, it's big. It's a big one. All the graphics, all of the tables, all of the explanations, all of the breakdown of all of the protocols you need to know. For instance, RDP, TCP 3389, Remote Desktop Protocol. That looks familiar. I know that from somewhere. Everything I have in my videos, I put into this document because you wanted me to. You asked me to. A lot of you said, well, I just don't have time to go through all these, but I do like the document. I want to have something available. Now that I've read through my book, I've watched videos, I need something that summarizes everything. This is exactly what this does. So it's something that you've also said, I want to contribute back to what you're doing on your website. And of course, I don't accept donations. I want to give you something back for the money that you spend. This is a great way to do it. So for only $10, you can get a copy of these course notes in PDF form available to download immediately. You can go to professormesser.com/securitycn. Security course notes is what that stands for. SecurityCN. And you can see all about the course notes. You can see what's really involved with these. It is an extensive document that is there, and it's only $10. So a nice way to do that. And I want to thank everyone for your support. You've bought these course notes through the years, so thank you so much. Without your support, I wouldn't be able to do this. So I am very grateful for your contributions, your help, and your support in keeping this going. I really do appreciate it. On the chat room, everybody says I should get another bank. Well, that's a different question, isn't it? The next question actually is, should I get another bank? Maybe that's what I should put here. I've never heard of a bank that works that way with their ATMs. That's not true, because you just heard about mine. So there's something new we learn every day. Let's do another question. Let's keep this going. Here's another question for you. This question is, which of the following would be the most common use of a session key? A session key? A session like a jam session? Nope, not like a jam session. Which of these would be the most common use of a session key? Another one of these questions is asking for the most common based on a list. And the list is, would the most common use of a session key be to confirming a CA certificate, digitally signing a spreadsheet, buying a product from a website, encrypting an email with PGP, or validating an operating system patch? One of these would be the most common use of a session key. Everybody in the chat room thinks I'm lying about my ATMs. I'm not. I understand that most banks are just the card and the PIN, but my example was right on the money. My bank doesn't require the card. You can just type in the. I'm not making this up. I'm really telling you this. It's a real thing. I will find a video of this and I will show it to you. It's remarkable. So which one of those would be the most common use of a session key? Many of you do know this and working through there. This is one that would be very good. Most common use of a session key, to have that there. Maybe you do know what the answer is. I'm going to take a peek. Some of you are Googling session key. Stop doing that. Don't Google the session key. Pretend we're sitting there in the exam. We're trying to go through all of the different options, trying to get rid of the ones we know it couldn't possibly be. Take your best guess and being able to do that. That's a pretty important one, important concept, especially if you're testing yourself. It actually helps if you get it wrong, because if you get it wrong, then you can learn what you missed, and now you'll know what to listen for and look for on the exam. So that becomes helpful either way when you work through this. So let's see what most people think would be the most common use of a session key. It's a lot of mosts, am I saying? How did we do? Well, 56% of you said buying a product from the website. That's a majority, but just over half, a little bit over half. 25% said confirming a CA certificate. 25% confirming CA certificate. So that would be a good number of you, a quarter of you said that. 14% said encrypting an email with PGP. Very good with that one. 3%, a tie for fourth, is digitally signing a spreadsheet and validating an operating system patch. Which one of those would it be? Would it be? Would it be? You got to think about all of those things. Remember, you don't want to answer in the chat room. You want to go to Socrative.com and answer on Socrative. That would be the place to go for looking at all of the possible answers. And yes, I give all of the answers to all of these when we go through them. Let's talk about using session keys. This is something pretty important that you need to know for your exam. And it's actually something that's so common. We would not have the internet today if we didn't have this methodology of exchanging session keys. Session keys are used all the time. A session key is a temporary key. It's something that's used to encrypt something from an encryption perspective, and then it's something that we just throw away when we're done with it. So it's used on a temporary basis to encrypt information between a couple of devices, or at least two or more anyway. One of the challenges, though, is how do you get a session key to someone across the network so that you can encrypt data if you aren't encrypting the data yet? There's a chicken and egg problem, isn't there? How do we manage that? Normally you would put it in a briefcase, you would put handcuffs, and you would carry the briefcase to the other person, where you would then open it up, they would break the seal, and then they'd have the session key, and then only two people knew what the session key was. We don't have that luxury on the internet, obviously. There's no way to do that. But the modern way of communicating private information over the internet without either side needing a single key for encryption and decryption is to use asymmetric encryption. So that's one of the things that does come in handy, is this asymmetric encryption. Make sure that you understand the differences between symmetric encryption and asymmetric encryption. It becomes pretty important whenever you're dealing with these encryption technologies. And make sure you really understand it for the Security Plus exam. So what we end up doing is using a key exchange protocol that's asymmetric based, so that we can take the public key of one device, we can put our symmetric key and encrypt it with that public key and then send it to another device. It's now encrypted. On the other side, that other device can decrypt it using their private key, and now they know the session, and only two people in this communication now know what the session key is. Now, why would you even do that? Why would you go through all that? If you already have a private key and a public key, why don't you just use that? You're already encrypting. It makes perfect sense. Well, the challenge, of course, with asymmetric encryption is there is a significant cryptographic overhead associated with this. There's a lot of CPU cycles that it takes to perform asymmetric encryption and decryption, much more than performing symmetric. Symmetric is relatively easy to do. Symmetric encryption and symmetric decryption from a CPU and resource perspective, much easier to do than asymmetric. And of course, on the internet, we're sending information, we're connecting to YouTube, you're streaming a lot of information back and forth to YouTube. If we had to do asymmetric encryption for every single packet that came through and every single bit of data, it would be very, very much an overhead, much higher overhead than if we were doing this with symmetric. And although it's true, CPUs are more efficient at encryption these days, you still have this very large gap between symmetric encryption and asymmetric encryption. Plus, symmetric encryption, very easy to do. We can see that with the CPUs that we're working with. It becomes handy to have that functionality there. And that's why we will use asymmetric to transfer a symmetric key and then use that symmetric key as our communication. This is what is used, of course, to have website communication. It becomes very useful to have that there. And this is one whenever we're working through it, and having this functionality, being able to buy something on a website uses this functionality for SSL.
uses this for what is now TLS, but we of course now refer to it still to this day as SSL, even though it really isn't. It's really TLS. The SSL communication uses this mechanism. It's able to transfer the session key using asymmetric encryption, and then from that point on is a symmetric encryption back and forth using this key that everybody talked about. One of the things that, if we look at this list, then we can see that it does not validate an operating system patch. That's more of a digital signature, and being able to use asymmetric encryption to do something like that. Digitally signing a spreadsheet also is an asymmetric function, very similar to validating an operating system patch in functionality. 15% of you said encrypting an email with PGP. PGP uses asymmetric encryption, so that's not a session key at all. 26% said confirming a CA certificate. The way that we validate a certificate that has been signed by a certificate authority is by looking at the digital signature that was added by the certificate authority. Again, it is something that's using asymmetric encryption. The only thing on here using symmetric encryption and making the most common use of a session key is buying a product from a website. If you answered C, you got this one absolutely right. Well done with that. Now, if you're watching this video for a continuing education credit, you might want to make note of this information. You want to go to the top or the bottom of the website, and you want to click the Contact Us link. When you do that, you want to put in that this is the February 2017 Security Plus Study Group. Make sure you give me your name. Make sure you give me your email address, or I won't be able to send this back to you. And make sure you put the special keyword of the month somewhere in there. This is just a message that I'm reading on my screen. I'm the one processing these. So somewhere in that message to me, put the secret keyword of the month of session key. That is the one we want, session key. So again, to get a continuing education credit, go to the top or the bottom of my website, click the Contact Us link, put in your name, email, make sure you put in that this is the Security Plus 2017 for February, and that the keyword that should be somewhere in there is the keyword session key. Very useful to have that, and that'll give you 1 hour of a webinar session. Something also, if you're watching this on a replay, you can do this as well. You don't have to be watching live for this. So if you're watching on the replay a year from now, 2 years from now, and you would like credit, a CEU for this, you can absolutely do that. I will take your CEU. I'll usually process them once a week, and I'll send that back to you. So it's very useful to have that there. So something for you to do and think about as you're trying to earn more continuing education credits for whatever you might be doing, whether it's CompTIA or anything else. People use these CEUs for almost anything. Let's do another question. The next question is about a WAF. A WAF. Which of the following would you most commonly identify using a WAF? I guess we have to know what a WAF is. So to be able to do that, that becomes a little bit more of a challenge. So I do have some possible answers here for you, of course. Which of the following would you most commonly identify using a WAF? Is it a MITM attack, whatever that is? A SQL injection is another option. Would it be a botnet command and control instructions? Would it be a file transfer containing a virus, or would it be a zone transfer? Yeah, I write these about a week before, and sometimes I read them through as I'm reading them to you, and I think, what would you most commonly identify using a WAF? In a way, I have to do these questions along with you to figure these out. For the people in the chat room asking questions about the CEUs, there is a limited number of CEUs that you can earn by watching webinars. You can't get all of your CEUs just by watching my webinars, and thank goodness. There's a limited number. So that's one of the challenges. And you have to, for Security Plus, the limit is 10. So you can get 10 webinar CEUs by watching my webinars. You can go back, watch 10 webinars, send me all of those continuing education requests. I'll send them to you. Sometimes people send me all 10 at once, which is the best way to do it, by the way, and just sends me a chunk of 10, and I can send them back one response saying, you're good for 10 hours. Very easy to do that. And you can do this whenever you'd like. You can go back years. You can watch any of my videos over the last number of years and get CEUs. So very useful to have that there. So let's see. The question we have right now is about WAFs, though. Have you ever used a WAF? Have you ever worked through a WAF and whatever that is? This is something that you will need to know about. Almost every single person out there that has some focus on internet connectivity probably has at least some functionality that is WAF-like, or they're using a WAF. So it becomes handy to have that there. you need to, of course, not just know what a WAF is, you have to know about the types of things that can be identified with a WAF. So that's another thing that might be useful to have that there. Let's see how we did on this one, though. Let's click the How Do We Do button here, and we're a little torn. We do have 45%, not quite a majority, but 45% did say SQL injection. So that's good. We at least have a good chunk, because the second most popular answer, almost a tie for second, would be a file transfer containing a virus or an MITM attack, which we'll talk about in just a moment as well. 11%, 10% said a botnet command and control instructions, and 9% said a zone transfer. So one of these would indeed be the most common thing to find if you have a WAF in place and you're looking through these. WAF is something called a web application firewall. It's often confused for a traditional network-based firewall, but a traditional network-based firewall is definitely not the same thing as a WAF. The only thing common between a traditional network-based, security-based firewall and a web application firewall is the word firewall. Everything else it's a very different science. It's a very different animal, this WAF. It looks at a very different kind of information. It has a much more focused view of this and being able to work through it. It's really looking at input. It's identifying, and we see this all the time. When you went to Socrative to log into this, it asked you for a room name, and you typed in Professor Messer. But what if you tried to type things into that field that could get around the application's intent and would gain you access to the data that was behind the scenes? This is something very common that happens in these environments. If the developers have not protected the application, if they're not doing any type of input validation, that's the secret word that they use, that's the code, that's the nomenclature they use for this. This input validation becomes very important, because if they are not validating the input, it's very easy for someone to sneak around these mechanisms that are there by just using these fields that are available for you to type in, and now they gain access to data. One extremely common way to do this is through a SQL injection. I have another video in my Security Plus series where I take you through a SQL injection. I show you how to inject data into one of these fields that gets you access to the raw data in the database. Very useful to have that there. So one of the things whenever I work through this becomes a little bit more of a challenge. If you are doing anything with credit cards, you are working on a website that takes credit cards, you are required by the payment card industry data security standards to have a WAF. It's written in there. You must have one. You don't have a choice. You got to buy one. You got to put it in place, because it's going to validate the fields that are on the screen when people type in credit card numbers, when you put in your name and you put in your address, so that people can't get around that to gain access to a database where all the credit cards might be. Now, on my site, I don't take the credit cards directly. Intentionally, I don't store your credit card. I don't see your credit card. Everything is done through a third party that already has these security rules in place. They are already PCI DSS compliant. The security is already there. There's already encryption in place. They already have a WAF. They're already doing all of these things. So it becomes handy for me that I don't have to worry about a lot of those details and working through them. So this is what you need to look for whenever you're trying to identify what a WAF might be able to take, but it might be able to stop. So if we go through our list, we'll start at the bottom. Zone transfer. Zone transfer is something done with the DNS most commonly. That's how we use that term. And it's when transferring information from one DNS server to another. That's actually a very common thing to have happen, although not always. It's something you might want to know about. But generally, we see zone transfers pop up as something that might be informational to you, and it might show up on an IPS. Not really something you'd see in a WAF, because there isn't input validation there. Another next step up, botnet command and control instructions. Again, that's something that's happening automatically. A botnet's on your side. It's trying to control what a machine is doing. That's something you would very commonly find on an IPS or next generation firewall. 14% said man in the middle attack. That's what the MITM is. Man in the middle attack's really invisible to the end stations. It's invisible on the network. It looks like a normal conversation. So it's almost impossible to identify a man in the middle attack with traditional network-based monitoring tools. Very, very difficult to identify something like a man in the middle attack. You have to identify man-in-the-middle or prevent man-in-the-middle attacks by using things like encryption. So that would not be something that a WAF or really anything else would commonly identify as something that sits on the network and monitors traffic. And then 18% said a file transfer containing a virus. Viruses are usually caught with network-based virus detection or with virus detection that's on an endpoint. It's not something you commonly identify using a WAF. And in this case, SQL injection is the right answer. SQL injection is what a WAF is looking at the input that's going into, for instance, a web form. And they're making sure that whatever input is in that form is appropriate for that particular field. If it's a zip code, the WAF is going to check and make sure that only numbers are put into that, maybe a dash if it's the larger zip code. So they're really doing some very detailed logic of what you're typing in to determine, is that really an address? Did somebody put an apostrophe into that, which is a real code? It's a real key when somebody's trying to do SQL injection. Apostrophe went into this. The WAF identifies, wait a second, you put an apostrophe with a select command after that. I clearly am identifying that as an attempt with SQL injection, and I'm going to stop it right here because I have a web application firewall. Very common to have that there. Something nice to have as that little extra piece of security for your applications so that something else isn't going to be an issue with those. So if you answered B, SQL injection, 49% of you did a great job with that one. Got that one absolutely right. That is what would be most commonly identified using a WAF, given those 5 options that we have here on the screen. You know, working with a WAF or a firewall or an intrusion prevention device or almost any of those devices that you would see out there can be a challenge if you don't have one. So one of the things that my friends at GTS Learning have done, if they created labs, they have all of these things available for you to use. The labs themselves provide you with access to a number of study labs. It's a year's worth of access to do Trojan malware detection, threats, cryptography, application security. You can learn about radius and routers and firewall rule management and DNS and IPsec and on and on and on. This is an extensive set of labs that they have available on their site. One of the things I like about these labs is they are real time. They're using real equipment. It's something that really helps you whenever you're trying to break through all of the different pieces of this. I like using them to even do some of the screenshots that you see in my videos. I've got their live labs up right now. I'm going to real quick show you this. We're a little short of time this month, but I'm going to pop up a few of these. All these labs that I have here, I haven't started any yet. Let's do a cryptography lab and have this here and work through all of the different pieces. Whenever I look through the different labs we're going to do with WinSCP, it brings up all of these servers that you can now power on. These are virtual machines. These are not emulated devices. These are virtualized operating systems. These are real live Windows operating systems. I can start up the domain controller and work through everything that's there and having all of those pieces. In fact, they have a lab diagram. There's 6 devices in this lab, including a domain controller. There's some Windows servers. There are Windows devices, Windows 7 and Windows 8, it looks like. And you can really step through how to perform this particular function. This one is cryptography and transport encryption using WinSCP. And I can, of course, go back and look at how would I work with this. It gives me the exact screen of me sitting in front of the device. And there's special pricing if you follow my link. You can go to the GTS Learning website and you would pay $169 for this. But if you follow this link, you get it for $109. And you also get the GTS Learning ebook and their sample questions with this as well. So this is one from professormesser.com/seclabs. You can follow that link and learn all about what they offer on these Security Plus labs. There are extensive labs available to have this here. I like using them because it allows me to really use it as if it's not just as if it's a real Windows machine. It is a real Windows machine. And you can step through. It's all done in your browser. You don't need any extra software to make that happen. So it's kind of nice to be able to use all of these functionalities. Like, where else are you going to get a domain controller? Well, right here, along with all of the other servers that they have here as well. I've got these other Windows devices. How about that Windows 8 device that we have right there? So I've got all of these. In fact, they're all listed on this screen. You can just scroll through all of them and work through my Windows 7 device that's there It's even trying to load stuff automatically that I clicked on earlier. So all of this is available. Have a look. You can find out the details at professormesser.com/seclabs. I want to thank the folks at GTS Learning for their ongoing support for what we're doing here as well. Let's do another question. I've got one for you. This question talking about security incidences. The question is, click next on my side. How can you best maintain the integrity of evidence taken after a security incident? Maybe you know. How would you do that? Well, I have some options for you that might help you with trying to figure out how to best maintain the integrity of evidence taken after a security incident. Would it be to capture system images? Would it be to record all time offsets? Would it be to interview witnesses? Would it be to seal, store, and document the evidence? Or would it be to capture all video? One of these would be the best way to maintain the integrity of the evidence after taking a security, the evidence that you took after a security incident. Maybe you know the answer. You can, of course, go to Socrative.com and to the student login and go to the Professor Messer room, and you can answer this one. Maybe you know what it happens to be. How can you best maintain this integrity of the evidence? This is something you will run into from a security perspective. As a security professional, you're going to be in this situation where you are in these very sometimes important and delicate situations where you're not going to be the only one looking at this data. This could be something that you would use for law enforcement. Something illegal, something criminal may have occurred on your network, and you as the security professional are the one responsible for maintaining the integrity of the evidence after a security incident. That may be something useful to have, to know about. And indeed, they do ask about this on the Security Plus exam. It becomes pretty important in these environments. A little bit more of a challenge to know these things. Let's see if we know more about the security incident issue. There's a whole section on the Security Plus exam about these security incidents. So let's see how we did with this one. How do we do? Well, it looks like we have two major answers people seem to be answering. 64% of people said to steal, not to steal. That's what happened with the security incident. You want to seal, store, and document the evidence. That was the 65% of you. 30% said capture system images. 3% said to record all time offsets. 2% said to capture all video. And nobody said to interview anybody. Wouldn't you want to interview people? Wouldn't that be what you do? With this, I guess not. Nobody said interview anyone. Well, the real key for this question was that I asked, how can you best maintain the integrity of the evidence that is taken after a security incident? I'm not asking you how would you take or what type of evidence would you take. I'm asking more specifically about integrity. So you want to be absolutely sure about the things that you're grabbing, that you're using for evidence. How do you make sure that nothing happens to that evidence? That is exactly the evidence that you took. Well, you do that by using a chain of custody. The chain of custody is the way that you would take the evidence and be able to control what happens to that evidence. And you can make sure that nobody tampers with that evidence, effectively maintaining the integrity of the evidence that you've collected. This is something that anyone who gathers any type of evidence should be doing. Usually it's a very standard bag. It's a plastic bag or a paper bag. It's something that you would be able to write on. It's something you can seal so nobody can gain access to that particular piece of evidence unless they break the seal. And if they break the seal, it has to be documented. Everything has to be labeled. Everything has to be cataloged. You're storing things so that nobody can change what's in that evidence, because obviously that becomes pretty important, that nobody's able to change any of the evidence that's there. So if we look at the different options and things we need to know about, and the 66% of you that said to seal, store, and document the evidence, you got that one absolutely right. You really do have to think about how you maintain the integrity of this data. And that becomes a pretty important thing if you're ever planning to work in security, that you understand the process. Because if you mess up this process anywhere in there, it's going to be a bad thing when people come back to look at the evidence and now there's no way to confirm that that evidence was really what you took at the scene of the incident. becomes a little bit more of a problem. So it's not only a situation where you don't want to mess with it, you want to create an environment where nobody can possibly change this evidence, and you know exactly who touched the evidence as it goes through the process. Pretty important when you work through all of these. One thing you need to know when you are taking this exam is that everything is written out for you. People ask me all the time, what do I need to know? What are the most important topics I need to study for to take my Security Plus exam? CompTIA has written down everything for you in detail. This is probably this is very unique in the industry. I don't think anybody else really does this in the certification world. Cisco doesn't do this. Microsoft doesn't do this. VMware doesn't do this. Nobody else gives you this level of detail for what you need to know on your exam. CompTIA documents everything in this set of exam objectives. If you don't have the Security Plus exam objectives, this should be the very first thing you get for your exam studies. It should be the last thing you look at for your exam studies. So make sure that you go through go to Google and type in CompTIA exam objectives. You can also go to professormesser.com/objectives, and it will take you to the page at CompTIA's website where you can download these objectives. This becomes really, really, really important, because if you know everything that's on these objectives, you can check them off. You're going to easily pass your exam. And I don't say that flippantly. Everything you need to know is in here. They don't tend to go outside the scope of these exam objectives, and they give you very detailed information about what you need to know for your exam. So make sure you grab these. If I had to give you the one tip I tell anybody who is starting their studies or anybody who's getting ready to take their exam, it's exactly the same tip. Download the CompTIA exam objectives and use them as your checklist. If you can check everything off, you're ready for your exam. If you cannot, you are not ready for your exam. It really is that simple. So something to leave you with as we get finished with our first hour of the study group today. I do one of these study groups every month. The next Security Plus study group is going to be on March the 15th. You can set your calendars. There's also a calendar at professormesser.com/calendar where you can see any of the live events that we do and when we're planning to have them. I try to plan this out about a month in advance so you can see when the next one will be. So next week is my bye week. I don't have a study group next week, but the week after that, we'll start the cycle again with my A+ study group, my Network Plus study group the week after that, and the Security Plus study group the week after that. If you're sticking around, of course, we're done with our first hour of questions, but we have an after show after this where I've got some emails that you've sent in, and we'll open up the phone lines for other things. But if you have to go, I can understand that as well. Make sure you check out my Security Plus course notes at professormesser.com/securitycn. Don't forget, on Twitter and YouTube and Facebook and Instagram and any of those social networking, you can simply type in professormesser.com/ the name of that social networking service, /YouTube, /Twitter, /Facebook, / any of those. I get it. Don't forget about your 10% discount voucher, professormesser.com/vouchers. And of course, my thanks to GTS Learning for their support of what we do here and the discount that they give you at professormesser.com/seclabs. So of course, all of these things could be something that we work through. I want to thank the folks that are here watching live. I want to thank you for watching on the replay as well. Would not be able to do these study groups without your help. So thanks so much for doing that. And I look forward to you joining us next month on the Security Plus study group. Thanks, everyone. It's time for the after show. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for sitting through that first hour. This last hour or so, however long it lasts, sometimes it's longer, sometimes it's shorter, is really up to you. I'm going to open up some phone lines in a moment. I'm going to answer any questions you have. It doesn't have to be about Security Plus. It can be about anything. Hopefully it's technology related. Maybe not anything, but really something that's at least in the focus of information security. Sometimes we get talking about games. Sometimes we talk about other things, but it tends to stay outside the realm of things that are a little bit weird. Before I open up the phone lines, one thing that rarely happens to me is in these study groups, I rarely get email feedback. I mean, we're really just asking questions and getting answers back. Sometimes if someone doesn't understand an answer or they don't agree with an answer, they'll tell me. But very rarely do I get folks that are they're angry at me over a question. And last month, there was a question I asked in the study group that got people, I don't know if angry is the right word, but very frustrated with me. I think some people were angry. I got a number of emails. I got people in the chat room giving me what for, giving me the evil eye. And I thought it might be good to revisit the question and talk about the responsibility of an IT security professional, because this is one where it becomes a little bit more of a challenge. The question from last month was this one. Your computers and backups have been infected with ransomware. Which of these would be the best way to get your data back? Now, the answers that were there were the answer to this. There were a number of other answers there. I should have probably put them on the slide. But the answer, the true answer in this particular case is, I think one of them was you can brute force the encryption. You can recreate it from the encrypted data. You can input all of the data again manually. But the answer was you pay the ransom and you get the key to get your data back. Boy, that set off a few little people telling me, not little people, but it set off a few problems for people telling me that perhaps that was not the best answer. And how can I negotiate with terrorists effectively? Someone did use that term, negotiate with terrorists. First, the people doing ransomware are not terrorists. They're absolutely bad guys. Let's be clear. They are a technology mafia, to be sure. But they are not threatening people with their lives in order to take a political idea and extend it further. These are business people. Very, very simply, they are the mob. They are bad people that are taking advantage of this technology to get money from you. As an IT professional in security, your responsibilities are a little bit different than an IT person who might be working with the server or with client workstations. Very often you'll hear companies tell you that the most important asset in their company is their employees. Okay, that's not true. That's never been true. It never will be true. They say that to make you feel better as the employee. Our most important assets are our people. Your people are very important assets, to be sure. Your employees are extremely important to your organization, to be sure. But they're not the most important thing in your organization. The most important asset in your organization is the data. I can't think of a really good example. There's probably a few out there. But for the vast majority of companies, if they lost all of their data today, all of their data went away and it was never coming back, they would be out of business, plain and simple. And I mean this for anybody, of course, financial organizations, insurance companies, me. This is one where even if you're a restaurant and you lose all your data, how do you know who to pay on your vendor side? How do you know how to pay your employees? How do you know your employees' names? If you're a large company, a large group, there's these big conglomerates that are large restaurants. The McDonald's organization is a restaurant. You take away their data, it's very difficult at that point to continue. They could probably rebuild a lot of their data because a lot of their core business is food, but it's very difficult now to rebuild from that. But can you imagine an insurance company? Imagine a car company? A ton of what we do with our businesses these days is the data. So the question that talked about, and this question was very specific, that said your computers and your backups have been infected. So there's no way to restore from a backup. Now, unfortunately, there are some companies that have been put into this situation. Hopefully your organization is one that doesn't have this situation. But whenever you get to that point and all of your data for your company has been encrypted, and the only way to get this data back is to give money to the bad guys, you give money to the bad guys. This happens all the time. This happens constantly. This is why ransomware continues to be a popular method to extract money from your pocket, because it works. Is it a bad situation? Absolutely. Do you hate doing it? Yes. Nobody wants to pay the bad guys. People sent me emails saying that I must like that I'm giving money to people that are in the mob. No, I don't like giving money to these folks. They got my data. And with ransomware, one of the things they do with ransomware is you've got 2 days. And in 2 days, we're just going to delete the decryption key. And you'll never get it back because we're not going to have it. You don't have it. Your data's not there. Whenever you work in IT security, as I mentioned earlier, you have a different responsibility to the organization than other parts of information technology. Other departments don't have the same connection to the company or the organization that you do. And that's primarily because you're responsible for making sure that data is always there and available and nobody else has access to it. But it's also because when you get into IT security, there's some very uncomfortable things you will be working with. And you should be aware of this if you're planning to get into this line of work. Of course, there's people that they'll be surfing sites they shouldn't be surfing on company networks and on company devices. And maybe they're going to pornography sites and they shouldn't be. Well, that can be addressed. You can have that person correct what they were doing. You probably have a process in place and they get a slap on the wrist and say, don't do that anymore. Some places they dismiss you immediately. Depends on your security policies. But it even goes beyond that, of course. That is something that's not criminal. It's simply something that perhaps is something unethical. But when you get into criminal, there are many things that happen from a criminal perspective on our networks and on our computers. This could be something as somebody taking and stealing the equipment itself. You're, of course, as a security professional, responsible for managing some of that inventory process. But the things that people do on the network can be criminal. As I mentioned to people that were in my chat room after the study group last time, I have worked with organizations that have identified people that had child pornography on these computers. That's a very difficult topic. That's a very uncomfortable topic. But you as a security professional have a different responsibility to the other people in your organization and to the other people in your community. That is a criminal act. And you will be asked as the security professional to gather evidence that will be used. And I have worked with companies where I went in and someone ended up being arrested and went to prison because of illegal things that they did on the network. It is a very difficult situation. I've been in places where I brought in equipment to monitor things on the network. They've identified somebody running a business that was a third-party business out of the corporate network, and they were fired. And you feel bad that they were fired, but you really feel bad for about a second. And then you don't feel bad anymore because they shouldn't have been doing whatever it was they're doing. In the case of something criminal, it's even worse. So if I had to get across to you folks that you feel kind of bad paying the bad guys, that's the least bad thing you're going to need to worry about in IT security. You're going to need to be a lot more responsible and think about a much broader set of very uncomfortable things that you may be involved with if you plan to get into security. This question specifically about recovering the data, this is the only way you can get it back. You really don't have a choice. You got to pay the bad guys, get the encryption key. Some folks were arguing with me about even that and saying, bad guys might not give you the key. Well, that's true. They might not, but they probably will. And do you know why they probably will? Because they're in business to not just get your money, they're in business to get everybody's money that they infect. And if they don't give you the key back, you're going to tell everybody, hey, if you get this malware, they don't give you the key. Don't even bother sending them money. That's the last thing they want. They're unethical, but they're business people. And they know if they can give you the key and you get your data back, that you're not going to say that this doesn't work. They want that money to keep coming in. They want everybody to get their key because if you get your key, they got their money. They're going to keep that party going all day long. So there were people that were very not happy with that answer. And I get it. I'm not happy with the answer. I don't like paying the bad guys. But that is something where you're not really going to have a choice. And ultimately, that's the least bad thing you're going to have to worry about in your world of IT security. So that's my perspective on that particular answer. And I thought it'd be worthwhile having a little conversation about why that particular issue was an issue and a broader scope of the issues you might run into as a security professional. Let's open up the phone lines. This will take a moment. I've got to click a few things on my screen here and connect to, where is that number? Right there, bleep, beep, beep, beep. And then I got to figure out what the number is. And then I've got to, there it is. I know, I'll put that in there. Hold on a second. You're being a little bit quick with me. Let's try this. Is it this right here?
Enter your 6-digit PIN number.
See what I mean about redundant? It's not PIN number. Let's do that.
Welcome.
Welcome. Nice lady. Thank you, nice lady. So now we've got, I'm just going to zoom up on my head. Whoa, there we go. There's the phone number. So if you'd like to call in, I will take phone numbers. I'll take phone calls directly. You can, of course, go through and ask questions in the chat room as well. I'll be monitoring the chat room. You can ask questions there. This is the live event chat. Then if you're here live watching, you can put questions in there as well. And you can, of course, call the phone line. This is something that is toll-free in the United States. So at 855-785-7545, I pay for the phone call. Same thing, if you're on Skype, you can call from Skype anywhere in the world with +1 as the country code, 855-785-RJ45. And you can answer that as well. Well, I've got some people already calling in. So let's hop over to the phone lines. Let's go to the 775 area code. Are you there, caller? What's your name?
Hey, can you hear me?
I can hear you fine. What's your name?
Hey, my name is William. It's awesome to talk to you after hearing your voice for so many months.
Thanks for calling.
Hey, so first I wanted to just say thanks for everything you're doing. I mean, I got my A+ yesterday. I'm just
excellent.
Super thrilled by everything you've done. And so, yeah, I really appreciate all this.
Congratulations. It's fantastic.
Thanks. So I wanted to comment, and I know you just covered this. I wanted to comment about the paying the ransom.
Oh, sure.
So to speak. So I mean, I worked at a tech center, like a private repair place, for just about 10 years, and it was really, really common to get those ransom requests on various customers' computers.
Sure.
And it was also very common for customers to pay the ransom, and many times they never got their data back.
Yeah.
So I'm not so sure about actually paying that ransom.
It's one of the challenges you have as a company that has a bunch of money wrapped up in the data. It's like playing poker. One of the things you do with poker is you're evaluating what's on the table. You're evaluating what the possibility would be of you being the winner of this particular hand, and then you're deciding whether to call a bet or raise the bet based on how much money is in the pot. And you try to figure out that ratio, like, is it financially worth it for me to put more money on the table if the return is going to be there? If the return's not there, then you fold your hand and you're out of this completely. When you're a company and they have all of your data, I think a lot of these ransomware companies ask way too little for a ransom because the data is so valuable, the companies will pay quite a bit of money to get it back. If you're an individual, it's a little bit of a different scenario. You have a little different of an equation, I would think, to go through. You have pictures, maybe there are some documents that would be nice to have back, but probably nothing that's going to put you out of business. It's not going to bankrupt you if you don't get that data back. But with a company, it's a little bit different of a philosophy, I think. And you're right. Some of these bad guys, some of these mobsters don't send you the key. And I think that's just bad business. If you're trying to get as much money as you want and they want to get as much money, they do send the key. And a lot of these bad guys do send the key. I think the majority of them do. But you're right. You never know if you're really going to get the key back, which is kind of a bummer.
Yeah. Well, anyway, thanks for taking my call.
Absolutely. Thanks for calling, William. It's one of those challenges. Whenever you work through, what are you going to do? What choice do you have? Kind of a bummer. Let's go to 228 area code. I like how I qualify that as kind of a bummer. That's my technical expertise. That's my opinion coming out. Are you there, caller? Oh, Hey, what's
Hello?
your name?
Oh, hey, my name's Red Wolf.
Hey,
Big
Red Wolf.
fan.
Hey,
How
saw
are
you
you
in the
doing?
chat room. Thanks for
Wait,
calling.
that's not my question. Sorry. My question is, where is it? It's on the board. Difference between PBKDF2 versus Bcrypt. I know they're both key stretchers.
Yep.
But which situation would you use one over the other?
The one that I've used the most is Bcrypt. I've never been in a situation where I've had to use the other. It's mostly used by developers, though. You usually see it on the computer science side of things. You rarely are using that technology in the IT security side of things. It's usually somebody who is creating an application, and they're trying to take what a little bit of input has been given to that application and stretch it out so they can use that as a much larger key. I've never been much on the development side of things. I used to do some development, and I do a little bit of scripting and Perl and little things like that on my website now, but I would never in a million years qualify myself as a developer. The whole idea of the advanced programming languages and things that are out there now are just something I never got into. But I would imagine if you were somebody creating an application that needed this type of cryptography and you needed to stretch that key out, you're going to use one of these libraries to be able to do that. The one that I've seen used the most is Bcrypt, because I've had to load that on my server so that the library was there because the application I was using took advantage of that. But I've never used any other key stretcher other than that one. And there's some good ones out there. I've just never run into them. So the answer to your question is I have no idea. I don't know why you choose one over the other, but I bet somebody who's a developer would be able to give you a pretty nuanced example of what really the differences are between the two. For the purposes of the Security Plus exam, you just need some good examples of what they are. They list those specifically in the exam objectives, and you should just be aware that that's what they're used for and the concept behind stretching that key out.
Okay. And so both of them are kind of equivalent. It's just choose one or the other.
I don't know if it's choose one or the other. I know they are both key stretchers, and there are certainly differences between them, or else there wouldn't be multiple key stretchers out there. I'm just not somebody who's worked with them at the very detailed level to understand what those very detailed differences are between both of those. For the Security Plus exam, you only need to know the broader overview of their key stretchers and what a key stretcher would do for you.
Okay. All right. Thank you, sir.
Absolutely. Thanks for calling.
All right.
Let's go back to the phones. First, let's check the chat room real quick. The chat room. Let's see. I think we're doing pretty good on that side. Let's go back to the phones. The 225 area code. Are you there, caller? Are you there, caller? Say something.
Hello?
Hey, what's your name?
Hi, my name is Benny.
Hey, Ben. Thanks for calling. What can we do for you?
Yeah, I'm trying to see which one is better to go for a master's in cybersecurity or to have the certification, Security Plus, if you have an engineering background.
Did you say the different options are a master's in cybersecurity or the Security Plus certification, or did I hear that right?
Yes, that's exactly the question. And because I have an engineering background, so I'm trying to see which pathway I should follow.
This comes up a lot, especially because people are trying to figure out, do I need to go get a formal education or a formal degree, or do I need to go get a certification? And the answer is you can't compare the two. It's a formal degree has a completely different set of criteria. It has a completely different scope associated with it. It's looked at differently by employers and other people than a certification might be. And relatively speaking, a certification generally is much easier to obtain than a 1 year, a 2 year, a 4-year degree might be, a formal education might be. And I think employers, whether it's right or wrong, there's certainly a conversation that can be had about that, look at formal degrees, I believe, with much more weight than they would something that's a certification. That's not always the case, but that tends to be more often than not, I would imagine. And also for security, I see a lot of people these days wanting to get into cybersecurity, and I think that's fantastic. There are plenty of jobs out there right now for good security professionals in information technology. But it's more than just the security piece. Your background in engineering, which should help quite a bit. But as I've said before in my Security Plus study groups, one of the significant aspects of IT security, I guess cybersecurity, which is a broader scope, I understand, but let's talk about IT security, is a huge amount of that is networking. You have to have a very good foundation in networking to hope to get into be functional from a security perspective, because a ton of these technologies that you're using and touching and working with are all on the network. Your firewall's a layer 3 device. You're doing IPsec communication to third parties over the internet. You're probably changing and configuring routing configurations and switching configurations. You have to be familiar with how to implement these technologies in a fault-tolerant configuration, which means you've got multiple devices. Are you using them on a standby and active basis, or are they an active-active configuration? And depending on which one you use, you're going to need to set up your switches differently, and you're going to need to set up your routers differently. Unless you understand how to set up the switch and the router, you're never going to get to the point where you understand how to implement the firewall properly. So there's almost a catch-22 there, that a nice foundation of networking is actually probably more valuable long-term in security than getting any type of certification or formal education that has the cybersecurity moniker associated with it. That's not to say that those things aren't important, because you absolutely need to understand the security side of it as well. We just talked earlier about all of these different policy issues that you're going to have to deal with that have nothing to do with the network. They have everything to do with security. So if I had to answer the question, this is how I answer this question always, which never fails to infuriate the person who asked. Should I get a formal education or should I get the certification? And my answer is always yes. You should get both of those, which is probably not what a lot of people want to hear, but I think it's the right answer.
Yeah.
I think it really is.
Then secondly, is there any kind of programming language you suggest to start with?
I mentioned this. Yeah, programming languages is something that came up in the last study group. I didn't get any emails about it, thankfully, but it's something I think a lot of people don't agree with me on many levels, and they're right on many levels also. It's not a black and white situation. On a very broad scale, when we talk about information technology, IT in general, which is generally where the security piece fits, IT doesn't necessarily have any dealings with programming. There's a completely different world of computing that we tend to put in the bucket of computer science. And computer science is that development programming side of things. And if you were to look at a company like Cisco or a company like Microsoft, there are a group of people that are developing. They are in a different group. They have a whole set of people that are set up to do programming and development work, and that's what they do. Then you have a whole nother group of people that are more on the IT side, that are handling the data center, that are dealing with the databases, that are setting up the business systems that are in place, that are dealing with the networking, that are setting up the security. That's the IT department. And we tend to put those in different buckets because they really are different worlds completely. There's a completely different science to programming. There has been, in the last number of years, an emphasis in telling people that they must know how to do Python programming to be a security professional. I will tell you that at least today, that is absolutely not the case. That is not true at all. I worked a long time in security, and although my programming skills, I think it's important to know how to do some basic programming, how to do some scripting, shell scripting, how to do some Perl, and of course, maybe you want to learn a little bit of Python. It's not a requirement today to be a successful IT security person. One thing that will help you, though, in certain environments, and I think more specifically as we get into more software design networks, software, that SDN world, where a lot of things are happening programmatically. A lot of things happen automatically on the network. As the network gets busier, new servers are automatically created out of thin air, new virtual machines, and they have database servers associated with them, and there are virtual firewalls that sit in front of them, and they're automatically deployed. And there has to be some programmatic process when you deploy these servers that changes IP addresses and configures firewall rules and sets up different VLANs. So there's switches that are touched, there's firewalls that are touched, there's servers that are touched, and all this has to happen automatically. Of course, you need to be familiar with the program and be able to develop the process to do that in whatever program. Most of the time it's Python that's doing something like that. Those are very, at least today, they continue to be very niche environments. If you're in the environment, it's obviously 100%. You need to know how to do that. If you're not in the environment, no, don't really need to know it. There are some advantages, of course. If you can do Python or Perl or anything that is a very well-known programming language that can access other devices through their API, through their application programming interface, and you're able to programmatically configure a firewall or request a report and show that report on a web page or send it to a PDF, that can really help you in your job as a security professional. It can automate a lot of the things that you have to do manually. So of course, there's value there. I'm not saying there's not value to knowing programming. I'm saying that it's absolutely not a requirement to know how to program in Python to be a successful security professional in IT today. Whether that changes in the future, we'll have to look and see. But that's something that hardly anyone, I haven't been in the IT security world for about 2 years, but when I was going around to a lot of different organizations. Very few people were programmers. Very few people bothered with the programming side of it because you did so little of that in your job. It just tended to be the way it was. So it's one of those things that's nice to know. It's not a have to have to be able to be a security professional.
All right. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. Thanks for calling, Ben. There is, and it goes back and forth. You know, I was able to create some interesting programs in my last job that did access a firewall over its API, and I was able to grab that information, pull it out of the XML, stick it on a web page, and create some interesting things that happened automatically. Very useful to have that there. But one of the things I really found was that it wasn't that necessary for me to get anything done. I could do it all from the front end of the firewall if I wanted to. So that's one of those things that does come in handy. Back to the calls. I do see some questions coming up in the chat room. We'll come back to some of those because some folks have been holding for a while. The 228 area code. Are you there, caller? What's your name?
Hey, this is Red Wolf again.
Hey, thanks for holding.
I have another question. So when you guys are talking about encryption, ephemeral keys
Yes.
and symmetric keys, I know, for example, if I go to PayPal, I'm looking at PayPal right now, and it uses elliptical curve crypto. It has ECDHE/RSA
Yep.
for the key exchange. And then for the cipher, AES.
Yep.
What's actually going on? Like step by step, like that.
Probably goes a little bit outside the scope of a single phone call, but I'll give you an overview of what's really going on. When these devices first connect to each other, when your browser connects to PayPal or any other site that you're communicating with or want to communicate with over a secure channel, they both talk to each other and they say, what do you know how to do? Well, I can do this type of key exchange. And the server might say, I can do this kind. And the client says, well, I can do this kind. Here's a big list of the things I do. And then they say, well, here's one in common that we can both do. There are priorities set up on the server to do this. Let's use this kind of key exchange to send information back and forth, and this type of encryption to be able to encrypt things on the network. So there's already a negotiation that takes place right away between the two so they can talk effectively the same protocol for the key exchange and the same protocol to be able to encrypt. And then they perform that process. They go through that. If you went to a different website, if you went to professormesser.com over HTTPS, you probably would see different protocols in use to be able to do that, because I've set up my server to work a little bit differently than how PayPal might work. It doesn't mean that those protocols are any worse or any better. It's just I'm using the ones that I think are going to be the best ones to be most secure and most common for the people that are communicating to my server. They are able to then exchange the keys using the key mechanisms. We talked a little bit about that in the study group, how it takes an asymmetric algorithm, finds a key that it can use for that asymmetric algorithm. It transfers, it encrypts the symmetric key, transfers the symmetric key, and then performs the encryption back and forth. So there's a number of handshaking steps that takes place before you're ever transferring anything from a secure perspective. There's some great websites out there. I think maybe even on Wikipedia show some of these handshakes as they go back and forth. It's not an easy map to follow. It's not like 1, 2, 3, and hey, we're encrypting. There's usually multiple steps and very complex questions that are asked on both sides, but it's effectively the same thing every time. There's a query. What can you do? I can do this. All right, let's use that mechanism. And now let's exchange a symmetric key. And now let's do SSL. That's effectively what we do step by step.
Okay, but what is the ephemeral? Like, I see the ephemeral into it. What does that bring to the table exactly?
Whenever you're dealing with encryption keys on a web server, it's a key that's only going to be used for a certain amount of time. It's ephemeral. It's not one that's here permanently. That's ephemeral, just means it's a temporary key. Because when you go to PayPal right now and you log in and you check your balance and you send people some money and you collect some money and you're done with PayPal, you log out. And at that point, PayPal doesn't need to keep the key around anymore. You don't need to keep the key around anymore. Your work is done, and throws the key away. That's all that really means, is that that particular key that you're using, the process that you're using to do this, we're not going to keep these around. It's not a key that we're going to save somewhere for later. We throw the keys away. And then if you happen to come back, we'll just create some new keys and we'll use new keys next time. But we don't need to keep these keys, because otherwise, can you imagine how many keys PayPal would have to keep on its servers if they weren't ephemeral? That'd be crazy.
Okay, well, why doesn't it say it's just a session key instead of ephemeral?
Well, that is effectively the key that is the ephemeral key. Well, actually for PayPal, there's two keys that are used, of course. There's the asymmetric keys that are in place. That's the pair. I guess there's really two keys there, but there's the asymmetric side and there's the symmetric side. In the case of PayPal, the mechanism that you just explained to me, not only do they throw away the session key when they're done, they also they create temporary public and private keys, and they throw those away when they're done as well. It's one of the nice things about that particular mechanism is that I can't go to the web server and steal its private key and somehow put together the conversation you had with PayPal, because PayPal already set that up beforehand. It creates the asymmetric key in real time as it's needed and then throws it away when it's done, which is a very safe way to send information back and forth, because you know that even if somebody got access to the server and got the private key and had your network data, they still would not be able to decrypt this.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Absolutely. Thanks for calling. And we've got the 240 area code's been holding for a while. Thanks for holding. What's your name? Are you there, 240? 240. Holding just a little bit too long, perhaps.
Hi, Professor Messer.
Hey, there you are. Hi, what's your name?
My name is Sorel.
Thanks for calling, Sorel. What can we do for you?
Well, I was looking at the CompTIA website earlier today, and I saw that they launched the CSA certification.
Yes.
And I was wondering if you're going to be delivering course for that.
For those not familiar, the CompTIA CSA Plus, they have to put the plus in there because I guess it's required now. The cybersecurity analyst certification is what that is. That is a certification that today went live, brand new. It is one that fits between the Security Plus certification and the CASP certification, which has been out for a number of years. So you now got one right in the middle, which is the CSA. This is one that they are touting as being a little bit more of a hands-on certification. If you look at the exam objectives, which I looked at for a moment and then I didn't look at anymore, the exam objectives talk about knowing how to use Wireshark, knowing how to use Snort. You know, these very specific hands-on technologies that you would commonly use if you were in a security environment. And I think that's great. That sounds like a fantastic thing. Your question specifically to me creating content for it is that I've not seen a big groundswell of interest quite yet. There's a lot of people right out of the gate who are going to be taking it. So there's immediately going to be a number of people that are going through the process of this. I've not really seen the enough to make me interested in it yet. One of the keys for me is I have to create content that people will watch. And if nobody's going to watch the content, then it's difficult for me to justify doing that because there's a large effort involved in me creating this type of security content. So if it takes off, if I think really this is going to rely on the hiring managers. If hiring managers suddenly say in this first year, wow, this CSA Plus is awesome. Everyone we hire needs to have their CSA Plus. Well, that's going to drive everybody who's in the hiring pool to go out and get their CSA Plus, and a lot of people will be clamoring for this security certification. So when it gets to that point, I'll reconsider. I'm thinking maybe a year from now, I'll look back at this and say, how are we doing with CSA Plus? How's that going? And then I can look back at it and determine, is this something I should consider doing or not? Of course, I probably will check in earlier than that. I'm constantly turning the boat month by month, week by week, depending on what's going on in the world. But right now, CompTIA is getting into a very big market with security. It's a very tough market. With A+, nobody else is in that market. With Network Plus, they're kind of fighting with Cisco, and that's it. But with security, there are 3, 4, 5 big players in the security certification market that are now in this pool. And CompTIA, I think they found with the CASP, it's a very tough market to get into because the ISC squared and their CISSP is very well considered in the industry. CEH, for all of its shortcomings, is a lot of people like the CEH and they're taking it. There's a lot of others that are focused on niche parts of security, like penetration testing. There's a lot of penetration testing certifications that people go after. And right now, CSA Plus is an unknown. So I realize it's out today. It's not as unknown as it was. It's more known today than it has been in the past. But that's the challenge that CompTIA has, is gaining some traction in what is already a a market that is just full of things. I understand it's a little behind. That's a little inside baseball. It's a little bit more of how I have to look at the world than how you have to look at the world. But that's why out of the gate, I don't have any plans to come out with any CSA content immediately. If it picks up and you can point at it, and I'll be the first one to say, boy, I was wrong about that. Let me go create some content. I'm absolutely the guy to say that. But right now, I'm just going to watch, and we're going to see how this goes, and I'm going to make some more decisions as time goes on.
Okay. My other question is, you mentioned earlier that the A+ and Network Plus are not really in the market right now compared to security. So what will be the best recommendation for somebody? I'm working on my cybersecurity major, master's degree, and I'm working on the Security Plus as well. I don't know if that will be the best plan, the best area to start with, or should I go back with the A+ and Network Plus?
I think a lot of people who get into security start with the Security Plus, and I think it's a fine place to start. When I took my A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus, I took my Security Plus first. There are a lot of people that come to my site that are going to work for the Department of Defense or one of their contractors, and one of the requirements for being in IT is that they have one in this very large list of certifications, and Security Plus is one of those. So a lot of times the people just getting into IT, the very first certification is the Security Plus. So it's not a bad place to start when you're dealing with these certifications, especially if you're interested in getting into security. But my point earlier is that don't just rely on the security certifications to get a job in security, because what you're going to find is a huge foundation of these jobs is about networking. So if you have a good foundation in networking, you're going to find the security part is just an overlay right on top. If you have no knowledge of networking and you get the Security Plus certification, there's a whole piece underneath that you don't have yet that you really need to think about getting, because it's going to help you in every aspect of your security job.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks for calling, Sorrel. It's one of those challenges, I think, with any position, but probably more so on the security side, is I don't think a lot of people realize just how much networking is involved on the security side. And I think a lot of places that are focusing on a cybersecurity formal education, I've looked through some of these and there's very little networking. I have to wonder who's going to be doing the networking part, because you're not going to know how to do any of that stuff. You better have that already. Let's go to 760. Are you there, caller?
Hello?
Hi, I hear you. What's your name?
Hi.
Oh, I hit the wrong button. You're going to have to call back. That was me. That was all me, brother. I meant to turn you up, and I turned you off. The story of my life. Call back. I'll get right back to you on that one, because I can see what I did there. I am so sorry. There's too many buttons. Let's go to 540 in the meantime, though. Are you there, caller? Are you there, caller? 540. Say something. Pick up that mute and tell me your name. Are you there? Are you there?
Hello.
Hey, what's your name?
My name's Don.
Hey, Don. Thanks for calling.
Pennsylvania, Virginia.
Oh, fantastic.
I've got what I have is a quick question on the different EAP standards and methodologies.
Oh, God.
And I've read many of them. And I'm trying to figure out what's one of the books that I've read on it is that TLS is one of the most secure EAP standards, but there's nothing that says this one is the most secure method and it's the one that is used most often. Just wondering if you could help me out with that one.
I would imagine it's the one that is used the most often. It's the one used for most of what we do on the internet. So it's very common, I would think, to see that one used the most. It's pretty secure. The different nuances of EAP, there's so many different implementations of EAP, because EAP is a framework. Right. It's something that anybody could take the framework and implement it into what they're trying to do to be able to come up with an authentication. I mean, because it's an extended authentication protocol. It's used to be able to authenticate one device with another. And one of the things that I've found is, especially with EAP, is there's so many different implementations of it. Some implementations probably not so great, like the early versions of EAP. And you talk about PEEP and LEAP, there's some older implementations of it. And people have gone into some of the older methodologies, how people implemented the framework and found holes in how it was implemented. But EAP itself, the structure of it and how it works, did not have any type of problem. It's how someone implemented it into the methods that they were using for whatever they were using to authenticate with. I don't know if I could list out or have a list or even know off the top of my head, I like this one better than this one's stronger than that one, this one's stronger than that one. And indeed, that's not important for the Security Plus exam, but certain EAP TLS, where we're doing this on our wireless networks. We are, most 802.1x is using that. If you're in an environment where you're authenticating on wireless, that's a very common authentication protocol to use. That's probably one that you'll see used the most out there. And I don't know of any significant cryptographic or implementation problems with that particular protocol because it's so common. If it was one that we found a problem with, we'd have to fix it pretty quick because so many people use it.
Okay, awesome. And from what I've also understand is that if it requires a certificate on the server and the client, that pretty much means it's a solid method or a solid encryption method. That's
a pretty secure method indeed. When you talk about certificates on a server, we see that all the time. We see people put a certificate on a web server, and then we use SSL to be able to communicate back and forth, and that's a pretty secure method. When you start now creating a client certificate, and we see this very commonly used on things like a smart card has a client certificate on it. A lot of VPNs will have client certificates on it. A lot of companies put a client certificate on people's laptop machines. And that's because if they take that laptop and they go to another city, they're at a conference, and they connect through the VPN and they put in their username and password, the VPN does a check to see, is there a client certificate on that side? Oh, it is. That's yet another factor of authentication where you could say it's got to be that person. It's got to be, at least it's got to be that laptop. So we can be assured that it must be that machine, or they must have that smart card in their hands because there is a client certificate on it and it's been signed by our certificate authority that's back here at corporate. And I check the signature. That's a legit certificate. That's a good way to confirm. But you can imagine the overhead of having to build a separate client certificate for everybody who needs one on their machine. There's a lot of overhead associated with that. You need a very well-constructed public key infrastructure in place. You need to have processes and procedures. How do you confirm that the person you're creating a certificate for is really that person? Because very often they're not sitting in front of you. It's over a phone. There's got to be some mechanism in place. So it's more than just, we'll stick a client cert on it. That's not enough. The most important part about that security piece is the trust part. You have to trust that you're really putting it on the right place and doing the right certificate. But you're right. If you got a certificate on both sides, now you're doing pretty good. Now you've really upped the ante with security.
Yeah, because well, at least in the DoD environment, everybody's got the CAT cards and everybody's got the certificates on their own machines and things. So that's the way we go.
And that's why it's very secure.
Thank you very much. I do. I'm planning on taking my exam Saturday, so wish me luck.
All right. Good luck, Don. Fantastic. Thanks for calling. That's exciting. Taking that Security Plus exam. Lots of calls this week. Let's keep going this month. Let's keep going with the 512 area code. Are you there, caller?
Yes, I am.
Hey, what's your name?
Yes, my name is Will Smith.
Hey, thanks for calling. What can we do for you?
Yes, so I am studying cybersecurity right now. I'm an independent study student, and I called you previously. I'm actually thinking about taking the CompTIA Security Plus exam, and my teacher told me about a discount that you can apply for, possibly $100 off of the exam.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
If you have an EDU address, there is a educational discount through CompTIA on their academic marketplace. If you go to the Google machine and the secret words are CompTIA educational discount, it requires you have an EDU as part of your email. So you have to be in that EDU domain. You can purchase vouchers at a significant discount. And you're right, it's like $100 off. There's a lot of money off for these academic discounts. So that's a great place to go. It's academic.comptiastore.com to be able to get those. And if you're someone who's in school, you have that EDU email address, you should absolutely take advantage of that.
Okay. One other question I've got for you. I have been running through all of your videos, reviewing all the material you have. I understand that's not all that you should do before you take this exam. What else should I be doing to prepare for this exam?
Yeah, in fact, if anybody's on my website, you've probably seen the frequently asked questions that I have there. And the first one is, can I just watch all these videos and I'm ready to go? And the answer I always give to that is yes and no. Yes, people have done that. But generally, they always have some type of knowledge in the industry. They have some experience under their belt. They already knew a lot of what they were already watching, and they were just trying to fill in the gaps that they had by watching my videos. I always recommend you use as many different study resources as possible. If you've got my videos, then get a book. If you got a book, get some Q&A, and get different kinds of materials. Don't just get a bunch of videos. Well, I got videos from this person and videos from that person. A book is able to teach you in a different way than videos are. And videos are able to teach you in a different way than a book. And you should be able to take advantage of all of those. Never limit yourself to a particular study resource. Use as many different resources and different kinds of resources as you can.
Okay, so use different formats of study material.
Exactly.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much, Professor Messer.
And good luck.
All right. Thank you.
More people in the screening queue. I want to thank you for holding there. They're backed up in the queue, but we're to the 719 area code. Are you there, caller? What's your name? Are you there, caller? Come off a mute. Say something. 719, are you there? You've been holding 8 minutes, so I would feel bad at missing you that are in there. You probably got sick of waiting, and you're probably not even listening anymore. I'm going to put you back in the queue, though, so that'll be something anyway. So we can always come back to that queue and have a look. Let's go to 804 area code. Are you there, caller?
Yes, I'm here.
Hey, what's your name?
Zoe.
Hey, Zoe. Thanks for calling. What can we do for you?
I actually have 2 questions and an issue with your website, so I'll try to make it pretty quick.
Oh, this should be good.
I'm taking my I got my A+ certification in October, and I've been having a very difficult time with Network Plus, which is why I searched for videos and luckily found you. Thank you so much.
Sure.
I was wondering, though, I'm also have vouchers for Security Plus, which I plan to take by May. How important is hands-on for Security Plus? Because now I'm nervous, having had so much trouble with Network Plus, and not sure if I'm going to pass my exam.
Yeah, Network
Because
Plus
I'm
is kind of a...
the GTS Learning Labs.
Yeah, the Network Plus, as you've probably seen, is kind of a different animal altogether, isn't it? I've never seen so many acronyms in my life. You have to know...
My brain doesn't like acronyms.
That's not a great certification then to be stuck with, because it is just chock full of acronyms. Who knew there would be more than they had in A+, and there's probably more in the Network Plus than there is on the Security Plus side. We love acronyms on the network side for some reason. And these technologies with networking, they never seem to go away. People are still using technologies for networking that we've been using for 30 years. So we're not getting rid of anything. We're just adding on to the pile. And I can imagine if you've never worked with this technology before, you've never gotten any hands-on, you've never worked with any of those things, it is a real challenge to wrap your head around these concepts. Even something as I would say benign as the OSI model, if you've never worked with networking, it's just nonsense, it seems, that's being thrown at you because it's a model of a thing that you don't know to begin with. And I can appreciate that. There's a real challenge there associated with it. I always recommend you get as much hands-on as possible, whether it's the A+ or the Network Plus or the Security Plus, because if you've set up an IPsec tunnel between 2 devices, you've now got a better understanding of what it takes to do that. You can watch the process and understand the keys and the information that you're adding to the configuration. And now you can remember some of those things when you see it next time. And you can see, oh, IPsec, I set up IPsec. Oh, here is the AH, the authentication header. I set up the parameters for the AH. Oh, here's the ESP for the secret information that was being sent back and forth. I configured the ESP. So a lot of those terms and the names and the numbers that you go through are, I think, solidified because you've got some of that muscle memory behind you. And if you've never had any experience with it, getting a switch and a router and plugging some of these things in can be really, really useful and a good set of knowledge to have. It's probably going to help you on the exam. Absolutely. You don't have quite the same requirement for hands-on on the Security Plus. There's a little bit, and I think it helps, like anything else, to have hands-on in the Security Plus. But it's not quite the same level of detail in Security Plus as it is on Network Plus. Security Plus deals a lot with process and procedure that kind of takes the place, whereas I think Network Plus is lots of memorization and lots of hands-on.
Okay. And the other question I have is, because of falling behind with studying for my Network Plus, I bought a CompTIA bundle, and I bought my A+, Security Plus, Network Plus bundles at the same time. So they expire, my vouchers and everything, in May.
Okay.
So do you feel that 3 months is enough time to prepare for the Security Plus? Because I'm a little bit further behind than I had anticipated.
That's a tough one for me to answer because everybody is different. I've had people come to my website and know nothing about security and study the Security Plus and take it in 2 weeks and pass it. I've had people come to my site that knew nothing about security and study for a year and finally pass it. So it really varies on how much you know about the industry, how much you're able to understand the topics, how much time you have during the day to go through all of those processes. It really is a challenge, and it's different for everybody. The key, I think, for you and for anybody taking these exams is your exam objectives. Use it as a checklist. That's going to be the measuring stick for you to determine how close am I getting to being able to take this exam. Let's see how many of these things I can check off that I really do know.
Okay. The other thing, before I talk to you about the problems I've had getting to your study groups the past 2 weeks, is I wanted to thank you for your notes. I did purchase the Network Plus and Security Plus notes, and they're absolutely amazing.
Oh, thank you so much.
I'm going to be using those on exam day, and I really appreciate that.
Oh, great. Thanks for your support, too.
And thank you for making these videos free. Not everyone can afford to pay $200+ for some of the training I've seen, so I really appreciate what you're doing.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, now the problem I've had trying to access your study group, I don't know what it is. I have the error message up in my browser. I had to do this through YouTube today, but Firefox tells me secure connection failed, blah, blah, blah. The authenticity of the received data could not be verified. And this happened last week when I tried to join Network Plus. I do use NoScript in my Firefox, and I have enabled and authorized everything, and it still does this. So I don't know if that's the issue or if there's something that I'm doing wrong to access the study groups through your website.
Well, I don't think you're doing anything wrong, because it's not that difficult. You go to the live, and everything should take care of it on its own. But there's absolutely something unusual going on with your connection. I am, as you can imagine, fastidious with my website certificates and the process that people use to access my server and make sure that the connectivity is there. If this is something, it sounds like this is a problem that keeps happening over and over again on this specific browser or this specific machine you're using. And so one of the easiest things, if anybody ever has a problem like this with any of it, grab a screenshot, come to my website, click the Contact Us link, or if you have a membership or even a free membership, open up a ticket inside of there. I have a help desk right in there, and that comes right to me, and then we can help troubleshoot the intricacies of that. And that happens occasionally if someone has a browser that's not updated or something weird in the connectivity between your browser and the front end to my web servers. It can happen.
Because I do use a VPN on my laptop, and it pretty much runs all the time, so I don't know if that's the issue. But
yeah, we'll have to break it down and see really what it's doing and what maybe is not filtered or what might be filtered through there. I try to make my website as generic as possible. I understand there's a lot on my website. There's plenty of JavaScript to go around, but I don't do anything outside the scope that's really unusual. I'm not doing any Java. There's not any Flash on my site. I'm being very specific, but usually if we can get a back and forth going and we can do some screenshots and I can do some research, we can figure out just what's unique about your connection that's not causing this issue with other folks, and usually we can figure it out.
Okay. Thank you, Professor.
Thanks for calling, Zoe. That's frustrating too. I have some people that they do run into these problems, whether their network connection is filtered, sometimes a VPN is going through a firewall and they're filtering different things. Sometimes there's a URL filter and people can't get to my site. I don't know why. It's just one of those challenges. Let's go back to 719. Are you there still, caller? This is the one we picked up on.
Hi.
Hey, what's your name?
Hi, my name is Yasin.
Hey, Yasin. Thanks for holding.
I did a 2-year community college course in which we learned all about the 4 CCNAs. And after I did that, I went up and wrote my A+ last week, and I passed it. Now, I'm wondering, in your opinion, would I be better off doing Network Plus by CompTIA or just going straight to CCNA?
Oh, this is a common question. This is probably a question for the ages. Probably got to be in the top 3. Of questions that I get, because it's difficult to answer that without getting into a lot of detail of your personal situation. Most people will say, don't bother with the Network Plus. If you want to get your CCNA or you're serious about networking, you go get the Cisco certifications. And they're not necessarily wrong, but they're missing a big set of variables. The CCNA routing and switching and the Network Plus exam are two very different exams. And I mean very different. The topics and some of the information on there is very similar between the two, but there could not be more of a difference between those two exams. The Cisco exam is extensive hands-on. It is detailed knowledge of the command line on a Cisco switch and a Cisco router. It is a very detailed view of these technologies where you really do have to understand not only what a routing table is, but how to set up static routes, how to configure dynamic routes, how to modify the ways that different routers talk to each other when they're sending routing updates. That is a very different type of exam than the Network Plus, which says this is a routing table. So you can already see there's a dichotomy there between those two. But if you are getting into networking, you know you're going to be getting into networking, or you know you're going to be getting into security, you will eventually go through these Cisco certifications for the most part. I didn't in my career because I took a weird path, but I think the vast majority of people, that's the path they take. And it's not a bad path because the Cisco certifications really teach you the technologies. Once you get those Cisco certifications, you can take that same knowledge to Juniper, to other layer 3 devices that are in firewalls, other switch manufacturers, and use exactly the same technologies, even if it's a different command line, because now you understand routing. You understand what IPsec does. You understand what spanning tree does. It's learning the real details of the technology that you can then apply across the board. So you kind of have to look at what you want to do. What are your goals? Some people don't need to get into that world. They don't have to know the command line of a Cisco device. They're not interested. They just want to know what the basics of networking, because at that point they're going to go into databases, or they're going to go into server administration. They're going to get Microsoft certifications. So they may not want to get into that level of detail with networking, so maybe they don't go the Cisco route. You have to make that decision for yourself. And I think most people will know pretty well, yeah, I really want to get into that networking. Let me go on the Cisco side. And if you do go the Cisco route, you're probably correct. You probably don't necessarily need to focus on the Network Plus at that point, because I think most people really do consider the Cisco, at least the routing, the CCNA routing and switching, to be something that's a next step up from Network Plus.
Oh, all right. Well, thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thanks for calling. That's one where that does come up a lot. And it just depends on how you're doing it, what you're doing with it. So we'll have to figure that out. 228 area code, are you there, caller?
Hey, yeah, it's me, Red Wolf again.
Hit me. What's your question?
Yeah. Yep. One last question. So things on the network, like explaining where things go on a network, for example, like 802.1x, where would you see EAP being at? Where would you see, like, what's a good way to visualize or to put things where they're supposed to be on a network? Is there, like, labs? I know there's that lab that you demonstrated us previously, but yeah, I don't know where things go exactly.
It's a little bit of a challenge, because if you've never worked with the technology before, you never know where to implement it. You're not sure where on the network it goes. And even more of a challenge, some of these technologies can be bundled together. So a good example would be there are some servers that will act. A good example is Microsoft's Active Directory database can also act as an LDAP database. You can access that via LDAP. So you might be setting up a firewall and you need to log into that firewall and allow people who are administering the firewall to log into it. But instead of setting up a local database on that firewall, you're going to want to access the already existing authentication database you're using for your entire organization with Active Directory. So you will point that firewall to your AD server, and you'll make sure the Active Directory server is configured to allow LDAP queries to that database. But there's some people that don't want to use that database. They'll use a radius database. Well, are they going to build their own server as a radius database? Sometimes there are Cisco authentication servers that do LDAP and TACACS and Radius in the same box. Maybe they'll use that one. There's also other Radius servers that will run on Linux, some that will run on Windows, some that run as hardware. So you never, it's always a challenge to figure out how you're going to implement this technology, where on the network you're going to put this technology. And you almost have to look at every single one of those as a separate problem to be solved to determine how many people need access to this, who's going to be accessing this technology. Do we build out another virtual machine? Is it going to use a Windows license? Do we put it on top of an existing server we already have? Unless you've gone through the process of doing it before and setting it up in a lab, you probably aren't even sure. And a lot of companies that have these large networks have a huge room set aside with one of everything so that they can go in there, build the network, try this new technology, and see how it works in their environment. Because sometimes we don't even know where we're going to put this stuff. We really have to try it ourselves.
Gotcha. Okay.
So hopefully that's giving you some perspective. The answer is, I don't know. And we never know until we really do it. And sometimes when we do it, we get it wrong and we have to fix it afterwards too. This is not a something where we always get it right.
Okay. So it's not really like set in stone. Like if you need this, then you have to have all these.
It's almost never set in stone. There's always pluses and minuses. You'll have fights amongst yourselves. These are usually good spirited fights between coworkers. Like, no, we need to put it on the Windows device. Yeah, but Linux is free and I can spin up a server over here. Yeah, but then we have to monitor that server for this other thing. So you're always going back and forth with advantages and disadvantages. And I think that's why a lot of people just have these labs ready to go so they can stick it in a lab and see which way does this really work the best.
Okay. And what about like those for the environments where you have all these devices that are all in one? Like UTM, what's the difference between like UTM versus buying separate security devices?
Yeah, well, we see fewer and fewer UTMs these days. Almost everybody's gone into the next generation of UTM, which is what the industry's calling next generation firewalls. And we're seeing more and more of that get collapsed into a single device. There's two philosophies of thought there. The philosophy from the fundamental side is let's let the firewall be a firewall. Let's let the switch be a switch. Let's let the router be a router. Let's let a URL filter be a URL filter. And the argument is a device that is specializing in one thing is really the one that can't help but being the best at what it does. But what we found is a lot of these devices, like next generation firewalls, are exceptional firewalls, fantastic routers. They can switch. They can be IPsec. They can be site-to-site and client-based VPN. They can do URL filtering. They can be a fully functional IPS that are just as good as the standalone devices of the past. So we're finding that we're able to bundle in more and more into a single device and still get exceptional performance along with exceptional functionality by bundling all of these things together because we can put these newer technologies in there. We've got faster processors. We've got more advanced operating systems. We've got faster network interfaces, and we can start just sticking all of that in one machine. Instead of me as the network and security administrator managing 10 boxes, I can manage one box, and there's a significant cost savings there.
Okay.
Hopefully that helps.
Yes. Thank you.
Thanks for calling. We've got more to go through. I know we're sort of over time, but we're just going to keep the party going. At 253 area code, are you there, caller?
Hi, my name is Anthony.
Hey, Anthony. Thanks for calling. What can we do for you?
I am calling because I have one quick question. So I bought my test out Security Pro, and I have been reading it, and I've also been watching your videos for like a month now, and I don't know when it's ready for me to pay for my Security Plus exam, because my friend told me that if I can buy the bosom.com, the 99 Security Plus, the thing, it can help me to pass the test. So I don't know how I can do. I think your challenge is a very common one that anybody who's taking the Security Plus exam, probably the most, has to struggle through this. And the one thing I go back to time and time again, and I think this will work for you as well, is go back to the exam objectives. Go back to all of your CompTIA exam objectives, download those.
For some of the exams I took, I printed them out, which people just don't do a lot of anymore, because I could write on it. I could check things off. I could circle things. I could draw lines through them. The exam objectives are very detailed, and you should be able to go through those objectives. And if you can explain that objective to someone else, you've got it down and you can check that one off your list. The Security Plus exam objectives are huge. This is not an easy thing I'm telling you to do. This is a very detailed thing that you have to do. But if you can go through the entire set of exam objectives and check off every single one of those, you will be ready for your exam. Regardless of what TestOut does, or what I tell you, or what Boson tells you, or what anybody tells you, that should be your measurement. You should be able to go to that document and it will tell you if you're ready to take your exam.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for calling.
And thank you for your video.
Thanks, Anthony. Take care.
Okay. Bye. Thank you.
That is your key. Definitely go with those. And those exam objectives, they are just so valuable. You don't want to miss those. To the 703 area code. Are you there, caller? What's your name? Are you there, caller? I know you've been holding a while. 703. Are you muted? Because I don't hear anything. Isn't this great? I don't have a group of people to screen my calls on my own call screener. There is nobody else here but me to screen those calls. Are you there, 703? Going once, going twice? I'll stick you back in the queue. Maybe we'll be able to hop back to you. Let's instead go to 443. Tell me, 443, what your name is. I hear white noise. Hopefully we haven't lost our phone line there. You have to wonder after a couple of those if it's me or if it's not me or if it's, let's try one more. 806 area code. Are you there, caller?
Hey, Professor Messer. This is Logan. I can hear you.
Hey, Logan, and I can hear you as well. What's your question?
Very cool. Well, before I get to my question, if I can, I would like to reinforce what you said earlier. I'm right now studying for the Security Plus, and I am finding that it was very, very helpful for me to have gone through the Network Plus first, even though that was such a beast of an exam to get through.
Okay.
And for those people that are struggling with it, I did have to take that exam twice, so don't feel bad if you're struggling through it as well.
That Network Plus is one. I hope they do some work on that exam. I think it's overly difficult in places. They need to fix a few things with it. But you're right. It's a tough exam just from a content perspective to get through.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, for sure. I did have one question. So with Security Plus, I've it's been interesting because I've been able to kind of go over some of my hands-on experience in my role with what's been going on recently. And one of those has been in a recent penetration testing session. We've come up on a vulnerability called the Suite 32 vulnerability, dealing with the 3 deaths encryption type. And
Sure.
Cryptography is the section of Security Plus I'm struggling with the most right now. So my question is this: what is the highest level cypher suite that we're looking at today, or the acceptable level at least?
It's the problem, and I guess this is a good thing, is that there's so many to choose from. Obviously, triple DES, which is the one you were mentioning here, has been a stalwart. It has been around forever. Prior to that was just DES. That the DES protocol for encryption was one that was, in our modern terms, relatively simple. You really could crack DES today with your mobile phone. It's something very easy to work through. But and when you get a triple DES, that's another set. It obviously made it more than 3 times harder. It was much harder. There were 3 things they did with DES that made it extremely difficult to be able to crack that particular encryption protocol. But it's going to depend on what you're using as your transport method. It's going to depend on how secure you want the content to be and how big you can make the keys. So you get into things like AES is a very common encryption mechanism that's used on wireless networks. And then you get into PGP type encryption mechanisms that are used for emails. So those are 2 very different encryption methodologies, and very different technologies in general, but they are used to protect things in a very secure way across those particular environments. So it's going to depend on what type of data you have and how you're sending it and what you have on both ends of the conversation. Something like an IPsec tunnel, for instance, might use a whole suite of different encryption mechanisms. But if you're using different IPsec equipment on each side, there may only be a handful, maybe 3 or 4 that both sides can recognize. There have been many environments where I've had to connect over IPsec. I've got a very powerful encryption device, and I've had to connect via IPsec to a device at the other end using triple DES because it was an older machine. It was back in the day, that was the highest level of encryption it had, and that's what we ended up having to use. So sometimes you're limited by whatever hardware you happen to have in place.
That makes sense, especially this particular issue was definitely related to Windows' remote desktop protocol, the RDP feature. So apparently it's not quite as up to date as we would like it to be.
Probably not.
As some of the other features are, but I just thought that was kind of interesting. I've been trying to take as I go through this studying and apply as many real world situations to it as possible with what I've experienced.
It's surprising how much of those.
Helps me understand it.
It's surprising how much of the real world things you start to pick up, and even better, it's surprising how much information you aren't getting now. When you hear about a breach in the government, and you're like, "How'd they do that?" Well, they're not telling you, and you're thinking, "What was it that got through their particular set of security protocols that now people gained access to this thing?" Sometimes we learn about it after the fact, sometimes we don't, but it's always nice to dig into those because you can now start applying some of these concepts to it.
For sure. Well, thank you, Professor Messer. That was my question for today.
That was great. Thanks, Logan. There's always a challenge there. Let's try that 703 area code again. Are you there, caller? Are you off mute? Are you back? Are you there? Are you over us? Are you just done with the whole thing? Are you sick of this? Back to
Hello?
Oh, wait. Hold on. I almost clicked away. Yes, are you there, caller? What's your name?
Hello, my name is Sean.
Hey, Sean. Thanks for calling. What can we do for you?
Hi. I just have actually a question for you, Professor. And it is my question is, what has been the greatest or most problem that you have come across in your information technology, networking, and network security experience?
The most interesting is probably not the most complex. I've been in some very interesting networks. One of the most interesting very early in my career is I had a hard drive failure, and I was the person that had to go to a site. I was the remote technician. I had to go to a site and replace a hard drive. And you would think replacing a hard drive doesn't sound like a big deal. I've done this a lot. No problem. I got it covered. I'll go do it. I showed up at the address, and it was the county jail. Like, well, okay. This was at the time I was working in Miami. So this was the Dade County Jail. Miami is a pretty populous place. The county jail is like 20 stories high. This is a big jail. I walked in. I'm someone I think I've had a pretty nice life that I've never had to be in jail before. And I've never had to visit a jail before. Pretty naive in some regards. And I walked in, and a jail, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, not the nicest place in the world. Not the fanciest joint that you can hang out in. A joint, to be sure, but not a fancy one. And so it's all gray and green. There's an enormous door in the front of this. It's like a bank vault door. And when it opens, there's an enormous cha-chang, and they pull this door open. It's like they're opening a vault, and you're walking in. A hard drive that I had to replace, the person came down to meet me, was on the psych floor, and it was a machine that was down at the end of the hall on the psych floor. So we get off the elevator. First, we're in an elevator with everybody else in the jail. I get off the elevator. I'm in my tie and my nice outfit. We're walking through the hallways. There's these tiny windows that are on the door of these people that are in the jail, in the psych ward. This was not, there was no good situation here. So I'm walking down the hallway. You know, I see the faces looking back at me through the little windows that are there. Fortunately, this was back in the day, as they say, and it was the older IBM PS2 machines that you could literally take apart with a thumb screw in the back. It popped off, and the drives were modular. This was the fastest hard drive replacement ever. It was like a rodeo. It was like me doing this, you know, my hands are up. I tied that calf, and let's get out of here. And I did. We got that replaced really quick. I got back in the elevator, back downstairs, and out the door. And that was one of the most interesting and one of the weirdest the replacements of hardware technology that I ever had to do with. And that's just one of them, but that was probably the one that sticks in my mind for a while.
Oh, okay. All right.
Next time, we'll have to do in the next study group what I did in a nuclear power plant and another one that I did in a car assembly line and a beer assembly line. So there's probably at least 3 more stories there somewhere.
Oh, okay. It's very interesting.
That's great. Any other questions, Sean?
Yes, there's one more question.
Okay.
So the best if you're entering like a help desk role, generally I've seen like as far as looking for an IT help desk role, like an entry level help desk role, it generally ranges from help desk administrator. Right now I'm pursuing a help desk administrator job role, so I'm hoping to be able to get this job position because I've been studying. I have my CompTIA A+. I have a Security Plus, but I have to renew it.
Right.
Because it's from a few years ago. It's expired, basically, generally right now I'm trying to study enough to be able to come into an entry-level help desk role.
Okay.
So that's what I'm working on now. And so the best route I'm seeing now is to get, because what I can do is I have my A+, but and I Network Plus, I think I should focus on more.
Well, it's going to depend, I think, on what you want to do. I started in a help desk. I started as that first job that I had was the one I just described of going to the county jail. It was more of a remote technician role. And then I upgraded after 9 months. I was able to get a job at an insurance company and their internal help desk. And I think people dismiss a help desk as if, why would I do that? That's so beneath me doing a help desk. That was one of the best jobs I had. I got to do so many different things, and I got to kind of learn where my interests were. That was the very first job that really got me interested in networking. And I understood almost immediately, like, whoa, check out this. They have an amazing network in this building. How does that work? And I just started digging into it. I just got a shovel and I started digging. And that's where everything started with me. I think the help desk is a great place for you to figure it out. Do you like databases? Do you like server management? Do you like working on the client operating system? Do you like working in development? Do you like working with networking? Do you like security? All of it's in the help desk. You get a little piece of everything, and you get to meet the people that are in the other departments who are taking care of these technologies, and you can kind of latch onto them. Like, I really like networking, Mr. Networking Person. What are you guys working on? What's happening there? Are you doing anything this weekend? Can I help you with that? Do you need to run some cable? I can get involved in whatever process was going on because I was already in the company and I was really interested in learning that. And they saw that I was, and eventually moved off into the networking team. So there's a great opportunity there for you. Figure out what you want to do. Try a lot of different things. What you want to do now is probably different than what you'll do 10 years from now. So you're never going to lock yourself in. You're going to follow wherever the road takes you, wherever that river flows, you're going to go with it. And sometimes you take a different path than what you thought you were. But that's the beauty of IT. You're never locked in to what you're going to do. Just start feeling out all of the different pieces. Do you take Network Plus or not? I don't know. Do you like networking or not? You're going to be able to figure that piece out. And you're really the only person who can answer that question.
All right. That's right. That's correct. Right. And there's actually there was one more question.
Sure.
So you had mentioned earlier in your show and with the after show that programming was generally it's a part of IT, but it's a separate part of this, separate from database networking and IT, like security and hardware and but it's software, and I've seen a lot of it, being developing. There are a lot of developers out there, but I've seen there's a lot of development out there. I think that the development is growing, but I also think that the database networking and security is growing too. But what do you think that the trend is nowadays? Is it more going towards coding and programming, or is it going more towards networking, IT security, and database?
Well, because I don't spend a lot of time on the computer science side, and that's the side that does the programming, I don't pay a lot of attention to the computer science piece. That's how separate it is from the rest of what we traditionally call IT. Computer science is a world unto itself. It has its own set of requirements, and there's so many different aspects to development. You could be your own development person writing apps for mobile devices. You could be working on applications that run in a web browser. You could be working for a large organization that are creating applications that are designed for pieces of hardware that the company builds. It's so diverse. So I never really get into that side of things to have an educated opinion of what's happening there. I probably should pay more attention to it, and I just don't. I tend to be more focused on the IT side, which is the databases and the networking and the security and the client operating systems and everything that keeps the company running that's different than programming effectively. There is a huge market on both sides of these. I see a huge opportunity on the development side. There are probably 5 or 6 applications I would love to build, but I'm not capable of building it. I don't have the time to build it. So if I had a programmer on site and on my staff, I know exactly what they would be doing for the next 3 years because I have a whole set of things they would be able to do. If I had, I also have these other things I want to do on the IT side. So if you talk to especially security people, security is a very hot market. Virtualization continues to be a hot market right now. And all of these things are building out on the storage side. So we see even more storage and more databases and more servers being used than ever. There tends to be a big focus on security because it's hard to find people. Security is something you just can't go to school and now you're ready to join a security team. There really is a curve. There's definitely a curve to get into security. And the inroads to security come from a lot of different places. You can't just get somebody right off the street and say, okay, I need a security person. You're my security person. You really have to bring people up through the ranks. And I think that's why in security right now, it's hard to fill in those blanks because there's not enough people yet. That will catch up. But in the meantime, everybody else has to do all of those things as well. You really have to work on the networking, work on the fundamentals like anything else. It's blocking and tackling. Work on the networking piece of it, work on the servers, work on the clients, figure out where you want to go, find your niche, and then specialize in that niche, and you're going to be fine.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. That's right.
Thanks for calling, Sean. Okay, I think we got one more call to go with. The 678 area code. Are you there, caller?
Yes, I'm here, Professor.
Hey, what's your name?
My name is Jordan.
Hey, Jordan. What can we do for you?
Yeah. Okay, so I have a question here regarding the Security Plus, the CSA Plus, and the CASP. Which one would you advise that I go into?
Well, the folks at CompTIA have set up a path for the CSA Plus and the CASP. They have a nice view of this on their website. If you were to look at the CSA page on the CompTIA website, they have a pathway, a CompTIA recommended cybersecurity career pathway, which is probably no better or worse than any other pathway. But the way they have laid it out is you start in the IT fundamental side, you move up to A+, you go to Network Plus, Security Plus, then they put CSA Plus as the next step. And as their highest end security certification, they put the CASP at the very top. So if you were following CompTIA's paths with this, that's the path that you would take. Ultimately, just like other people have called today, the right path is going to be one that you are comfortable with, that you know where you want to go along these lines. I think the one from CompTIA, that's a pretty good path. You learn the fundamentals with A+, you get that networking foundation we were talking about, you move into security, and then ultimately into the higher levels of security certification. But I think there's always an exception to the rule. And that exception is going to be what you're interested in doing. A lot of people take their Network Plus and they go to Microsoft and get a bunch of Microsoft certifications because they love working with those servers and the database servers and setting up the infrastructure. That's where they feel the calling is for them. Some people love the security side and they follow either the CompTIA security or they get security certifications from another third party. Some people like databases. Some people like other operating systems like Linux. It just depends on what you're really wanting to focus on or what really interests you. Because once you find the thing that interests you, you can get the job you want. Now you can start tweaking that and move into whatever might interest you next. And that's really the goal, I think, in IT.
Okay, Professor. Well, thanks for the advice.
Thanks, Jordan. Appreciate the call. Well, that covers our phone calls for today, an hour and a half of after show. So we were certainly able to cover a lot in a very short period of time. I want to thank everybody for hanging on. Are you even still there? I'm going to look at my YouTube stats just to see there's still people there. There's still some folks watching. I will have this study group in a podcast form later today. So if anybody is looking for a replay or you'd like to have this available in podcast form, and it's something that's available on professormesser.com/podcast. I want to thank everyone for joining me for the main part of the study group with our Q&A and for hanging out in the after show and asking questions and just seeing what we can get into, what other topics we can have there. Thanks for joining me this time. We will see you next month on the Security Plus study group. Thanks, everyone.